Hello everyone, I am Mr. Scary Stories, and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. Story 1. Harper Wren always felt invisible. At school no one saw her, except when it was time to laugh at her. She was small, quiet, and strange. She liked reading old books, especially about magic and myths. That made her a target. The worst was Cassie Dalton, the queen bee of the school. Cassie was tall, blonde, and cruel. She led a group of bullies. Tyler, the muscle-bound jock, Brooke, the gossip queen, and Jason, who laughed at anything if it meant hurting someone. They loved to pick on Harper. But Valentine's Day was the worst day of all. Harper had a secret crush on Eli Turner, a kind boy who sometimes smiled at her in class. She had never dared to talk to him, but today she gathered the courage to write him a Valentine's card. She kept it simple. Happy Valentine's, Eli, from someone who cares. Her hands trembled as she slipped the card into Eli's locker. Later that day, as Harper sat in the library, she heard laughter echoing from the hall. Her heart sank. When she stepped outside, she saw Cassie holding the card up high. She read it aloud, mocking every word. From someone who cares, Cassie sneered. How sad. Students crowded around, laughing. Harper froze. Her chest felt tight. Cassie held up her phone. She had filmed Harper putting the card in the locker. Should I send this to Eli? Maybe he'll die laughing, Cassie said, grinning. Harper's face burned. She wanted to disappear, but she couldn't. She ran, hearing their laughter follow, her like a shadow. Harper locked herself in her room that night. She couldn't cry anymore. Her heart felt heavy, like it was rotting inside her chest. On her desk was a dusty old book she'd bought at a strange store months ago. The shopkeeper said it was a grimoire, a witch's spellbook. She'd only ever flipped through it, thinking it was just stories. But tonight, a page caught her eye. The Archer of Vengeance, he who punishes the unworthy of love. Call him when your heart is broken beyond repair. Beneath the words was a symbol, a crooked heart pierced by an arrow. Harper's hands shook. She read the spell. It asked for something simple. A drop of blood, a token of betrayal, a whisper of pain. She had all three. Harper pricked her finger. She placed the ruined Valentine card in a circle drawn on the floor, and then she whispered, I summon the Archer of Vengeance. I summon the horned archer. Punish those who mock love. The candle flames in her room flickered. The wind howled outside. A deep groan echoed in the air, like something waking up underground. Then, silence. Nothing happened. Harper sat there, empty and cold. Maybe it was just a stupid story. She went to bed, feeling more broken than ever. At midnight, a cold wind blew through her room, even though the window was shut. Harper opened her eyes. A shadow stood in the corner, tall, thin, with wings folded. Behind its back, horns curled from its head. Its face was hidden in the dark, but she could see glowing eyes. It didn't move, just watched her. Harper couldn't scream. She couldn't breathe. Then the shadow whispered in a deep, hollow voice. I heard your pain. Harper blinked, and it was gone. She sat up, sweating and shaking. Was she dreaming? Down the street, a dog howled. Somewhere, a window shattered. Harper didn't sleep for the rest of the night. At school the next day, Harper kept her head down. The halls felt colder than usual. The air was heavy. Cassie and her group laughed in the corner as always. They hadn't stopped talking about Harper's Valentine card. But then Jason, the loudest of them, stopped laughing. He stared at the end of the hallway, frowning. "Did you guys hear that?" he asked. "Hear what?" Cassie said. Jason looked around nervously. A whisper. Someone said my name. Cassie rolled her eyes. "You're hearing things." But Harper knew better. She felt something in the air, like a storm waiting to break. That night, Jason walked home alone. The streetlights flickered. He heard it again. A whisper. "Jason." He spun around. No one there. Then a soft melody drifted through the air. An old, eerie love song. It made his skin crawl. "Who's there?" he shouted. Then he saw it. A tall figure on the rooftop, wings spread wide, glowing eyes watching him. "What the hell?" The figure raised a black bow, pulled back an arrow that dripped with dark liquid. Before Jason could run, the arrow flew, piercing his chest. Jason screamed. His body burned from the inside, like his blood was boiling. He fell to his knees, gasping, choking. His last breath came with a whisper in his ear. "Mock love, and love mocks you." His body hit the ground, lifeless, eyes wide in terror. The next morning, the school buzzed with news. Jason was dead. Heart attack, people whispered. So young. Cassie and the others looked pale, exchanging nervous glances. Harper sat, in her usual spot, pretending to read. But inside, she was shaking. She didn't want this. She thought the spell was just a story. But now Jason was dead. And in the back of her mind, she remembered the shadow, the glowing eyes. She had summoned something real. That night, Harper dreamed, she stood in a dark forest. In front of her was the shadow, the horned archer, his wings stretched wide, his bow resting on his back. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. His voice was like stone grinding together. "You called. I answer. I didn't want them to die," she cried. The archer stepped closer. His face was still hidden, but his eyes glowed. "They mocked love. They mocked you. I punish those who scorn the heart." Harper shook her head. "Stop!" But the archer just spread his wings. "It has begun. I will not stop." She woke up screaming. At school, Harper looked for someone, anyone, who might understand. She remembered Mr. Ellis, her history teacher, who loved talking about old legends. She stayed after class, her voice shaking. "Mr. Ellis, mister, do you know any stories about dark versions of Cupid?" Mr. Ellis raised an eyebrow, curious. "Cupid, the Roman god of love?" Harper nodded. "But evil." Mr. Ellis thought for a moment. "There are old stories, yes, about a god of love twisted by centuries of betrayal and cruelty. A vengeful spirit, a hunter of hearts." Harper's stomach twisted. Mr. Ellis looked at her closely. "Why do you ask?" Harper couldn't answer. She just left, quickly. She knew then she had called something ancient, something angry, and it wasn't done. That night, as Harper lay in bed, she heard the wind again, cold and sharp, a whisper through the walls. One heart down, more to go. Harper closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. She had started something, and there was no stopping it now. The next morning, A cold fog hung over the town. The news of Jason's death spread fast. At school, everyone talked about it in hushed voices. Heart attack, they said. He just dropped dead. But Harper knew better. She sat alone in the library, her eyes heavy from lack of sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him, the horned archer. She could still hear his whisper. One heart down, more to go. Her stomach twisted. Harper didn't want anyone else to die. She thought the spell was just for fun, a way to curse the people who had hurt her. She didn't think it would actually work, but Jason was dead, and she could feel the archer was still out there. In the cafeteria, Cassie, Tyler, and Brooke sat together, quieter than usual. Cassie stirred her drink with a straw, her eyes darting around. "This is weird, right?" Jason wasn't sick. Brooke shrugged. "Weird things happen," Tyler grunted. "He was weak, that's all." But Cassie didn't look convinced. She stared at her phone, watching the video of Harper placing the Valentine card in Eli's locker. She muttered. "This all started after we humiliated Harper." Tyler scoffed. "Are you saying the freak did this?" Cassie didn't answer, but her gut told her something wasn't right. Later that day, Harper stayed after history class again. She waited until the last student left before approaching Mr. Ellis. He looked up from his desk. "Miss Wren, back again?" Harper bit her lip. "You said there's an old story about a dark Cupid." Mr. Ellis nodded. "Many ancient cultures believed in love deities with two faces, one of beauty and kindness, the other of vengeance and punishment. In some myths, when love is scorned, the god changes into a hunter." Harper's throat felt dry. "Can he be stopped?" Mr. Ellis frowned. "These stories usually end in blood. Once summoned, the god doesn't stop until all debts are paid." "Debts?" "Every broken heart, every cruel joke, the god collects." Harper felt like she was going to be sick. Mr. Ellis studied her. "Why do you ask, Harper?" She shook her head. No reason, but her eyes betrayed her. That night, Harper sat on her bed, staring at the spell book. She wanted to undo it, but there were no instructions to reverse the ritual. The only thing written beneath the summoning spell was, "His arrows fly until the heart is empty." Suddenly, Harper felt dizzy. The room spun, shadows moving unnaturally. She blinked and saw herself in a dark hallway. She wasn't in her room anymore. A cold wind howled. She saw Brooke, the gossip girl, walking alone down a street. Brooke was on her phone, laughing at something, but behind her, the horned archer followed. His wings spread wide, bow in hand. Harper screamed, but no sound came out. She was trapped, watching the nightmare unfold. Brooke stopped walking, hearing a voice behind her. "Brooke!" She turned around. No one. She laughed nervously. "Tyler? Is that you?" Then, a soft melody played, like a twisted love song. The air grew cold. "Who's there?" Brooke demanded. The archer stepped from the shadows, tall, horned, and terrible. His eyes glowed red. "What the hell?" Brooke muttered. The archer raised his bow, knocking an arrow tipped with black metal. "Wait! I don't even know you!" Brooke cried. The archer's voice echoed. "You mocked love. Now feel its pain." The arrow flew, striking Brooke straight in the throat. She gasped, blood pouring from her mouth. But instead of dying instantly, her body twisted, her limbs locking into the shape of a broken heart. Her eyes bulged, lips frozen in a silent scream. Harper watched it all, powerless. She woke up screaming, soaked in sweat. The next morning, Harper checked her phone. News spread quickly. Brooke was found dead in an alley, her body contorted in a grotesque shape. Everyone at school was horrified. Harper walked the halls, feeling eyes on her. She felt guilt, fear, and something worse. The archer was still killing, and she couldn't stop him. In class, Mr. Ellis looked at her with concern. After the bell, he stopped her. "Harper, something is haunting you. I can see it." Harper whispered, "Can legends be real?" He nodded. Sometimes. She confessed everything. The spell, the shadow, the deaths. Mr. Ellis looked grim. "You summoned something older than love itself," he said. "The archer punishes those who mock the heart. You gave him a reason." Harper's voice broke. "I didn't want them to die," Mr. Ellis sighed. "You need to find a way to break the connection." Harper nodded, but deep down, she didn't know how. Meanwhile, Cassie was unraveling. First Jason, then Brooke. She sat in her room, hugging, her knees replaying the Valentine prank video. "This is my fault," she whispered. Then, a tap at her window. She jumped. Slowly, she peeked outside. Nothing. But when she turned around, there he was. The horned archer stood in the corner of her room, wings folded, watching. Cassie screamed. She grabbed a lamp and threw it, but the shadow vanished. She was alone again. Or so she thought. That night, Harper stood in front of the mirror, holding the spell book. She spoke aloud, hoping the archer could hear. "Please, stop this. I didn't mean it." The wind outside howled. The candles flickered. A whisper. "You asked. I answer." She fell, to her knees, sobbing. Then she remembered Mr. Ellis's words. Once summoned, the god doesn't stop until all debts are paid. She wiped her tears. If she wanted to stop this, she had to know what debt was left, who else was marked. She had to protect them, even if they didn't deserve it. Harper made her choice. She would face the archer, no matter the cost. The school was drowning in fear. 2 students dead within days, both friends, both from the same group. The news called it tragedy. The students whispered about a curse. But Harper Wren knew the truth. She had summoned something, and now she was sure. It wouldn't stop until it had all of them. Cassie Dalton didn't sleep anymore. She sat in her dark bedroom, hugging a pillow, eyes fixed on the window. She kept hearing whispers. Sometimes she saw a tall shadow in the corner, wings folded, eyes glowing like dying embers. Cassie tried to tell herself it was in her head, but she knew better. She remembered Harper's eyes when they pranked her with that stupid Valentine card. The hurt, the sadness. Cassie muttered to herself, "It's her. She did something." But deep down, she was scared Harper didn't do this. Something else did. Harper sat in Mr. Ellis's classroom after school. She held the spellbook, her fingers trembling. Mr. Ellis read the pages, his face pale. "This is not just any spell, Harper. This is old, ancient." Harper whispered, "How do I stop it?" Mr. Ellis shook his head. "You're connected to him. He feels what you feel. He kills because you're hurt." Harper's voice broke. "I didn't want this. I just wanted them to stop hurting me." Mr. Ellis sighed. "That's how it always starts." He closed the book and said, "There's a legend. Before Cupid became the god of love, he was a punisher, a god who hunted those who mocked love, who treated it like a joke." Harper's eyes widened. The horned archer. Yes. The darker side of love. Harper felt a chill. "Can I stop him?" Mr. Ellis looked grave. Only if you sever the connection. But there's no clear way. Harper stood. Then I'll find a way. That night, Tyler stayed late at the school gym. He lifted weights, trying to shake the bad thoughts. But the air felt wrong, cold and heavy. The lights flickered. A soft melody drifted through the gym. An old, eerie love song. Tyler stood up. "Who's there?" Silence. Then, a whisper in his ear. "Mock love. Pay the price." Tyler spun around. The horned archer stood in the shadows, wings stretching wide. "What the hell are you?" Tyler yelled. The archer raised his bow. "Wait! Don't!" Tyler screamed, running for the door. The arrow flew, piercing his back. Tyler collapsed, gasping. Another arrow struck, pinning his hand to the wall. A third, his other hand. The archer shot more, fixing Tyler's limbs in place, his body forced into a twisted, heart-shaped pose on the wall. Tyler screamed until his throat gave out. Then, silence. The archer whispered, "Love is not a joke." Harper woke up screaming, her body covered in sweat. She had seen it again. In her mind. Tyler pinned to the gym wall, his face frozen in terror. She couldn't take it anymore. She went back to Mr. Ellis. "He's killing again. I can feel it." Mr. Ellis looked grim. "You have to face him. Directly." Harper shook her head. "I'll die. Not if you go where he's weakest." "Where?" "The Valentine's dance. That's where this all started. That's where you must confront him." Harper swallowed hard. She'd never been to a dance. But now she'd have to go, not for fun, but to stop a monster. The next day at school, Cassie stormed up to Harper in the hallway, her eyes wild. "You did this," she hissed. Harper stood her ground. "No, but I called it." Cassie shoved her. "Undo it." Harper's eyes filled with tears. "I can't." "Then we're all dead," Cassie spat. Other students watched, whispering. Cassie's hands shook. "You think you're better than us? That you're some witch? You're just a loser." Harper stared at her. "I didn't want this, but you made me want revenge." Cassie's face paled. Before she could say more, the lights flickered. Even though it was daytime, Harper whispered, "He's here." Cassie's face crumbled in fear. That night, Harper dreamed again. She stood in the school, empty and dark. The horned archer stood before her. "I'll stop you," she said. He stepped closer. "You called me. I am your pain. I am your heartache." Harper shook her head. "You're a curse." He smiled coldly. "Love is a curse." He raised his bow, but stopped. "Face me, at the dance." Then she woke up. She knew what she had to do. Harper went to Mr. Ellis one last time. He gave her a piece of paper with a counter-ritual. "You must face him in the place of his summoning. Speak these words, but be warned, he may still kill you." Harper smiled sadly. "I'm dead anyway." She went home, preparing for the dance, not with a dress or makeup, but with courage. She wasn't going to dance. She was going to end this. The night of the dance arrived. Students gathered, laughing, dancing, celebrating love. But Harper stood, in the shadows, waiting, because she knew. The archer was coming, and the killing wasn't over yet. The Valentine's dance began under red and purple lights. Balloons shaped like hearts hung from the ceiling. Love songs played. Students dressed in their best clothes, laughing, dancing, taking pictures. But Harper Wren stood by the door, watching. She wasn't here to dance. She was here to face the thing she had summoned. She could feel it in her bones. The horned archer was coming. The air was too cold. The shadows were too deep. He was close. Then, Cassie Dalton entered the gym. She looked different. Pale, tired, like she hadn't slept in days. She wore a black dress, not red or pink like the others. Her eyes darted around, expecting something terrible. She spotted Harper. Their eyes locked. Cassie marched straight to her. "This is all your fault," she hissed. Harper stayed calm. "I didn't want it to happen. You didn't stop it either." Harper looked away. "It's too late." Cassie grabbed Harper by the collar. "Then fix it." But before Harper could answer, the lights flickered, the music slowed. Everyone stopped dancing. A cold wind blew through the gym. Then he appeared, tall, winged, horned. The horned archer. Students screamed, backing away. Some ran, others froze, staring in horror. The archer walked slowly across the floor, dragging, his bow behind him, his eyes glowing red. Cassie trembled, her voice weak. Why are you here?" The archer's voice echoed, deep and hollow. "You mocked love. Now you pay." Cassie screamed, running toward the exit, but the doors slammed shut on their own. Harper stepped forward, clutching the paper Mr. Ellis gave her. The counter ritual. But the archer raised his bow. A black arrow formed in his hand. Cassie fell to her knees, sobbing. "Please." "I didn't mean it," the archer whispered. "Intentions do not erase cruelty." He fired. The arrow struck Cassie in the chest, but it didn't kill her instantly. Instead, she levitated off the ground, her limbs stretched wide, her body twisted, bones cracking, until she formed the shape of a broken heart. Her body literally snapped into the symbol of her mockery. She cried in pain, her voice fading into gasps. Then she fell, dead. The room was silent. Students cried, huddled in corners. Harper stood, frozen, tears in her eyes. The archer turned his gaze to her. "You called me. You fed me." Harper swallowed hard. She raised the paper with shaking hands and began reciting the words. Harper's voice was weak but steady. "I sever the bond. I release the shadow. Return to the darkness from which you came," the archer hissed, stepping back. His wings shivered. "Stop," he growled. "You need me. I am your pain." Harper shook her head. "You're not my pain. You're my mistake," the archer roared, firing an arrow at her, but it stopped midair, shattering into dust. Harper kept reading. "Return to the void. No heart commands you now," the archer screamed, his voice shaking the walls. His body cracked, shadows leaking from his chest. Harper stepped closer. "You're done." The archer's form crumbled. His wings turned to ash, his horns broke, his eyes faded. Then he collapsed into nothing but a single red arrow on the floor. Silence. The students stared at Harper, the girl who had killed a monster. Lila, the teacher chaperone, called the police, but by the time they arrived, there was no monster, just broken doors, dead bodies, and terrified kids. Cassie lay still on the floor, her body twisted, eyes open but lifeless. Harper stood over the red arrow. She picked it up, feeling its cold surface. She knew she should destroy it, but she couldn't. Some part of her wasn't ready to let it go. Later, Mr. Ellis found her outside, sitting alone with the arrow in her hand. "You ended it," he said softly. Harper shook her head. "Did I?" Mr. Ellis sat beside her. "The archer is gone. For now." She stared at the arrow. "But this It's still here. Mr. Ellis sighed. That's the thing about curses. They never really leave. They just sleep. Harper felt the arrow pulse faintly in her hand. She stood up. I'll keep it, to remind me. Mr. Ellis looked worried. Just don't ever use it again. Harper nodded, but inside she wasn't sure she could promise that. As she walked home, the red arrow hidden in her pocket, Harper heard a soft whisper in her ear. I'll always be with you, Harper Wren. She shivered but didn't throw the arrow away. The story wasn't over. Not yet. The school gym looked beautiful under the glow of pink and red lights. Balloons floated against the ceiling. Music played loudly. Laughter filled the air. It was the Valentine's dance, and almost everyone was there, but not Harper Wren. She stood just outside the doors, heart pounding. She wasn't dressed up. She wasn't here to dance. She was here because she knew, tonight, the horned archer was coming to kill. She could feel it in the cold wind brushing her skin. Harper clutched the paper Mr. Ellis had given her. The counter ritual that might stop the archer once and for all. Inside the gym, students danced without a care, but Harper only watched the shadows. Then she saw her. Cassie Dalton had come. She wore a deep red dress, her face pale. Her eyes darted around like she expected the shadows themselves to reach. For her, Cassie wasn't here to enjoy herself. She was waiting for her end. She spotted Harper by the door. Their eyes locked. Cassie stormed over. "What are you doing here?" Cassie snapped. Harper stared back. "Stopping this. You started this." Cassie's voice shook with rage and fear. "Jason, Brooke, Tyler, they're dead because of you." Harper said nothing. She knew it was true. But this wasn't the time for blame. "Cassie," Harper whispered, "you need to leave. He's coming." But Cassie laughed bitterly. "Why leave? He'll find me anyway." She walked away into the crowd, alone. The lights in the gym flickered, the music slowed, the speakers crackling. Then the air turned ice cold. The students stopped dancing, their breaths visible in the air. A deep, dark whisper floated through the room. "Mock love, and love mocks you back." Then he appeared. At the far end of the gym stood the horned archer, taller than any man, his massive wings folded behind his back, horns twisting from his skull. His eyes glowed like red coals. Students screamed. Some ran for the exits, but the doors slammed shut. Harper stepped forward, clutching the counter ritual. The archer raised his bow, a black arrow forming from smoke. "Harper Wren," he whispered. "My heart." Harper stood her ground, shaking. "You don't have to do this," she said. "I called you, yes, but I take it back." But the archer smiled, a terrible, empty grin. "Once called, I cannot be uncalled. The debt is not yet paid." His eyes turned to Cassie, standing frozen in the middle of the dance floor. The queen bee, the cruel heart. Cassie backed away, sobbing. "No, please, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it." But the archer raised his bow. Harper screamed, "No!" She ran forward, reading the counter ritual aloud. "I sever the bond. I break the chain between us," the archer hissed, turning, his gaze back to Harper. "You betray me, little heart?" Harper's voice trembled, but she kept reading. "Return to the shadows that bore you. Let the curse die with your arrow." But the archer laughed. Too late. He fired the arrow, straight at Cassie. The arrow struck Cassie in the chest. She didn't fall. Instead, she began to rise, levitating above the floor. Her limbs stretched painfully wide, her bones cracking audibly. Her body twisted unnaturally, her form bending until she was shaped like a broken heart, her own symbol of mockery. She screamed, a long, terrible sound, before her body snapped. Completely, she crashed to the floor, lifeless, her eyes wide open, mouth frozen in terror. The gym was silent. Everyone stared, too afraid to move. The archer turned back to Harper. Only one debt remains. Harper knew. It was her. Harper's hands shook, but she raised the paper. She shouted louder, "By my blood, by my pain, I end you." The paper burst into flames, glowing with a sudden light. The archer stepped back, his form flickering like smoke in the wind. "You cannot end me, Harper Wren. I am your pain, your sorrow. I live in your heart." Harper screamed back, "No! You live in my hate, and I'm done hating!" The archer howled, his body cracking, splitting. Students watched in horror as his wings caught fire, his bones glowing. Harper shouted one last time, "Be gone!" The archer roared, collapsing into ash, leaving behind only a single red arrow glowing on the floor. Silence returned, the lights flickered back to life, the doors unlocked. But the damage was done. Cassie was dead. The dance was ruined. The school would never be the same. Harper stood alone in the center of the gym. Everyone else fled, but she picked up the red arrow. It felt warm in her hand. Mr. Ellis entered, his face pale. He had come too late. "You did it," he whispered. Harper shook, her head. "Did I?" Mr. Ellis looked down at the arrow. "That's his heart, the archer's heart." Harper stared at it. "I should destroy it," she said. "But you won't," Mr. Ellis said sadly. Harper closed her fist around the arrow. "No," she whispered. "Not yet." That night, Harper sat in her room, the red arrow on her desk. The wind outside whispered her name. Harper Wren. She didn't answer, but deep inside she knew. Some love never dies. Some hate never fades. And the horned archer was not truly gone. Not yet. Harper Wren hadn't slept for 2 days. The red arrow sat on her desk, glowing faintly in the dark. No matter how many times she tried to throw it away, it always reappeared, sometimes on the floor, once under her pillow. She even found it inside her pocket when she swore she didn't put it there. She was haunted, and she knew it. The horned archer might have been defeated at the dance, but some part of him still lived. Inside the arrow, inside her. The wind outside her window whispered her name. Harper Wren. She tried to ignore it, but deep inside she didn't want to. Mr. Ellis knocked on her door the next morning. He looked worried, older somehow. "You didn't come to school," he said gently. Harper stepped aside to let him in. She didn't bother. Hiding the arrow, Mr. Ellis stared at it. "You should destroy it." "I tried," Harper whispered. "It won't let me." He sat down. "Because it's still connected to you." Harper hugged herself. "How do I break it?" Mr. Ellis shook his head. "I don't know. Legends say the archer was once a god, of love, pure and bright. But over centuries, betrayal turned him into a shadow." He paused. "Some say the only way to truly end him is to confront his origin. The first heartbreak." Harper frowned. "How?" Mr. Ellis looked grim. "You have to face him. Not just in this world, but in the place where he was born. The shadow realm of hearts." Harper felt cold. "What happens if I fail?" Then you'll become part of him, Mr. Ellis said quietly. Forever. Harper looked at the arrow. She made her choice. That night Harper lit candles around the arrow. She whispered the spell from the grimoire backwards, her voice shaking. The air grew cold. The shadows in her room deepened, stretching like black fingers. Then, darkness swallowed her whole. She opened her eyes in a twilight world. The ground was made of broken stone hearts. The sky was red and black, swirling like storm clouds. The air smelled of roses and blood. Ahead, a massive palace of bone and shadow stood tall, and in front of it, the horned archer, waiting. He was larger than before, his wings torn and bleeding, his horns cracked. His eyes glowed brighter. You returned, he said. Why? Harper stepped forward. I want to know why you became this. The archer chuckled. Because love is pain. Everyone betrays. Everyone mocks the heart. Harper shook her head. Not everyone, the archer sneered. Then come. See. He raised his hand, and shadows wrapped around Harper, pulling her into his memories. She stood in another world, bright and golden. She saw the archer, once handsome and winged, laughing, flying through the skies. He shot golden arrows, making people fall in love. Then he fell in love himself, with a human woman. But she betrayed him. She used his love, then left him for another. Heartbroken, the archer's body began to change. His wings darkened. His face twisted. His arrows turned black. Everyone laughed at him. The god of love unloved himself. He screamed, and the world turned black. That was how the horned archer was born, a god of vengeance. Harper watched, tears in her eyes. Back in the shadow realm, Harper stood before the archer. I'm sorry, she whispered, but I won't be your pain. Not anymore. The archer stepped forward. Then die, Harper Wren. He raised his bow. Harper pulled, the red arrow from her pocket. It burned in her hand. I'll end this, she said. She stabbed the arrow into the ground. Light exploded, blinding. The archer screamed, shadows peeling from his body, his wings burning away. He collapsed, his form shrinking. Back to the man he once was, sad and broken. I didn't want to be this, he whispered. Harper knelt beside him, then let go. His body turned to ash. The realm crumbled. Harper opened her eyes in her room, gasping. The red arrow was gone. The whispers were gone. For the first time in months, it was quiet. She smiled weakly, tears running down her face. Weeks passed. The school tried to heal. The Valentine's dance was never spoken of again. But one night, in another town, a young girl sat crying after being heartbroken. She found a strange red arrow in a box under her bed. She held it, feeling it warm in her hand. Outside, the wind whispered, I'm still here, because love never dies, but hate never does either. The road was empty. Miles of twisting blacktop cut through open farmland and tall, silent trees. Evan Cross gripped the steering wheel, squinting through the windshield. The late afternoon sun was burning orange behind the hills. Are we lost? Lena Carter asked from the passenger seat, brushing strands of red hair from her eyes. We're not lost, Evan said. Just detouring. No cell signal, said Noah Bell from the back seat. That's not a detour. That's death. In a horror movie, Kayla Reed, sitting beside him, laughed nervously. Stop it. You'll jinx us. The group of friends had planned a weekend trip. Small towns, scenic photos, late-night campfires. It was supposed to be fun, but after missing a turn, they hadn't seen another car or gas station for over an hour. Then they saw it. A small hand-painted sign on the roadside. Finch's Cafe. Pies, coffee, and art. Open. Noah leaned forward. That's either a miracle or a trap. Evan turned. The wheel. We'll take our chances. The cafe sat at the end of a gravel driveway, surrounded by wind-tossed sunflowers and tall grass. It looked like it had been pulled from a different decade. A white-painted building with red trim and a wraparound porch. The neon open sign flickered weakly. Kind of cute, Kayla said, stepping out. I've seen this in movies, Noah muttered, and someone always dies. Inside, the cafe smelled like fresh pies and cinnamon. Sunlight streamed through dusty windows. The walls were covered in framed photographs. Hundreds of them. Some were old black and white portraits. Others showed smiling families, landscapes, children, pets. All incredibly lifelike. One thing was strange. None of them looked like regular photos. There was something real about the eyes, as if the people inside were watching them. From behind the counter, a cheerful voice called out, "Hello there." A short, plump woman in a flowery apron stepped forward, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "I'm Marjorie Finch," she said with a wide, practiced smile. "Welcome. Sit anywhere you'd like." "Thanks," Evan said, leading the group to a corner booth. "You all look hungry. I'll bring you samples," she added, disappearing into the back. The group looked around. "Okay," Noah whispered. "Tell me I'm not the only one creeped out by these pictures." Lena nodded slowly. "They look too real." Kayla stepped closer to a photo of a boy holding a balloon. "His eyes are so sad." Evan looked at another, a young couple, holding hands. Both faces frozen in mid-smile, and yet something in their expressions looked like they were screaming. Marjorie returned moments later with 4 plates of pie on the house. She beamed. "My treat. You're all so charming. Let me guess. Artists?" "We're just friends on a road trip," Lena said. Marjorie's face flickered for a moment. "Road trips are special, but you must take a photo before you leave. I insist." She pulled out a small vintage camera from behind the counter. Noah laughed awkwardly. "We're good, thanks." "Oh no," Marjorie said, her voice a little colder. "Every guest gets framed." The room seemed to go still. Kayla cleared her throat. "You mean you take a picture and hang it up?" Marjorie smiled again, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Exactly." She walked back behind the counter. The 4 sat in silence for a few moments. "Let's eat fast and get out," Evan muttered. Halfway through the pie, Noah stood up. "I'm using the bathroom." He passed through a narrow hallway with more photos. The lights buzzed overhead. The air grew cold. He opened the bathroom door and found only a blank wall. "What the—" He turned back. The hallway behind him had changed. It stretched longer now. The walls curved slightly, and the light dimmed to red. "Noah," a voice whispered. He spun. "Hello?" No answer. Just more photos. But now they looked different. The faces in the frames weren't smiling. They were screaming. Back at the table, the group waited. "Noah's been gone a while," Kayla said. "I'll check on him." Evan stood up. But before he could move, a sharp click echoed through the room. Everyone turned. Marjorie had taken a photo, aimed directly where Noah had been moments earlier. She calmly placed the camera down and picked up a new photo from behind the counter. She hung it on the wall. Evan stared in horror. It was Noah, in the photo, standing in that warped hallway, frozen in mid-step. "Noah?" Evan said aloud. No response. The photo glowed faintly, then his eyes blinked. Inside the frame. Kayla screamed. Lena covered her mouth. "That's not possible." Marjorie stepped forward, smiling. "Some people are easier to frame than others." Evan grabbed Kayla's hand. "We need to go, now." They rushed to the door. But when Evan tried the knob, it wouldn't turn. He looked through the window. The world outside was gone. Only black fog swirled outside the glass. "We're not in the same place anymore," Lena whispered. "Let us out!" Evan yelled. Marjorie chuckled. "Oh, I'm afraid it doesn't work that way." She walked back to her counter. "Eat your pie. I'll be back for your pictures." Then she vanished behind a curtain. Evan found a side door and forced it open. It led to the kitchen, which looked like a normal country kitchen at first. Then he noticed the shelf lined with dozens of photographs not yet framed, each glowing faintly. Faces trapped inside. Some were screaming, others were blank-eyed. He saw Noah's photo, still glowing, still moving. Next to it, a half-finished frame labeled Kayla. "She's getting ready to trap the rest of us," he whispered. Then something moved in the shadows behind the hanging pots. A hand reached out, long, thin, black as soot. Evan slammed the door and ran back. Back in the main room, Evan grabbed the girls. "We have to destroy the photos, all of them." But it was too late. The lights flickered. The photographs on the walls began to move. Hands pressed against the glass, faces shifting, and from the shadows, a voice whispered, "One down, 3 to go." Harper turned toward the hallway. Noah's face looked out from a photo, mouth open in a silent scream. The cafe had taken him, and it was still hungry. Noah Bell opened his eyes, but this wasn't the cafe. He was lying on dirt, cold, damp, and black as ash. The sky above wasn't blue. It was a sickly green, swirling with dark clouds. There was no sun, no sound except a faint, endless hum. He sat up. All around him stood giant picture frames, like doorways with nothing inside them. Some were empty. Some had blurry figures inside, pacing or screaming, but no sound came out. Noah stood, heart pounding. "Hello?" No answer. He saw trees, but they were dead and twisted, their bark cracked, like burned wood. The air smelled of iron and dust. Noah turned slowly, panic rising. Then he saw it. A figure in the distance, tall and thin, walking slowly through the dead forest. Its head was wrapped in cloth. Its arms were too long. It dragged something heavy, a frame, and it was coming closer. Noah ran. Back in the cafe, Evan, Lena, and Kayla stood in the center of the room. The walls still buzzed. The photos shifting, faintly glowing. Noah's picture hung among them, his face frozen mid-scream. "What do we do?" Kayla whispered. "We find a way to pull him out," Evan said. "I saw more pictures in the back room." Lena clutched his arm. "What if we get trapped too?" Evan shook his head. "Then we don't give her the chance." They crept toward the kitchen again. The cafe was too quiet now. Even the wind outside had stopped. In the kitchen, rows of half-finished frames sat on shelves, glowing faintly. Evan found a small wooden box with a vintage camera inside. The label read, "Capture and Release." He didn't know what it meant yet, but the camera felt heavy, important. Suddenly, footsteps. Marjorie Finch stepped. In, wiping her hands on her apron, eyes dark. "You shouldn't be in here." Evan raised the camera. "What is this place?" Marjorie smiled, her voice sweet as sugar. "A gallery of moments. Everyone deserves to be remembered." "You're trapping them!" Lena yelled. Marjorie tilted her head. "Better here than forgotten." Then she whispered something under her breath, and Kayla screamed. She began to fade, her body dissolving into thin air. Evan shouted, snapping a picture. But the flash only stunned Marjorie. Kayla vanished. Her scream echoed once, then silence. On the shelf, a new photo appeared. Kayla, hands outstretched, mouth open, trapped inside a frame. Kayla opened her eyes to darkness. Then, light, a dim glow like dusk. She was in a gray field, the grass brittle and sharp. In the distance, she saw a figure running toward her. "Noah?" she called. It was him, his face pale with fear. "Kayla?" he gasped. "How are you here?" "She got me," Kayla said, eyes filling with tears. "I don't know where we are." Noah grabbed her hand. "We need to move. Something's chasing me." Then a low, heavy groan echoed through the air. They turned and saw it. A creature, towering and thin, skin black like burnt wood, face wrapped in stained cloth. The Framekeeper. Its long fingers dragged empty frames behind it, the glass scratched and bloody. It didn't run, it walked, slow but steady, because it knew. Eventually, everyone got tired. Back in the real world, Evan stared at the camera. Marjorie chuckled. "That won't help you. Only I can open the frames." "Then open them," Evan shouted. Marjorie's smile faded. "I think I'll wait until you're all portraits. Then I'll hang you side by side." She whispered another word. Evan felt his skin tingle, like needles under his flesh. But Lena grabbed a frying pan from the counter and smashed it against Marjorie's head. The old woman stumbled back, dazed. "Run!" Lena shouted. They sprinted into the cafe's dining room, searching for another exit, but the doors were gone. Only walls now. "The windows," Evan cried. They smashed a chair into the glass, but instead of breaking, the glass rippled like water. Lena touched it. Her hand began to sink in, like being sucked into jelly. She pulled back quickly, gasping. "We're trapped," she whispered. Evan looked at the photos on the walls. All faces, all still. Except one. Noah's face turned, eyes shifting, looking at Evan. For a brief second, Evan swore Noah's lips moved. "Help us." Noah and Kayla kept moving, ducking behind dead trees, hiding among crumbled stone arches. They passed other people, pale, hollow-eyed souls, sitting still in the dirt, whispering names to themselves. Kayla asked one, "What are you doing?" The woman, her skin gray, answered, "Remember your name. Forget your name, and you disappear." "What happens then?" Kayla asked. "They become part of the frame," she whispered, eyes wide. "Gone. Forever." Then, a loud snapping sound. The Framekeeper had caught someone else. In the distance, they saw a man pulled into an empty frame. His body twisted, flattened, sucked into the glass. His screams didn't last long. Noah grabbed Kayla's hand tighter. "We need to find a way out, before we forget who we are." Evan paced, staring at the camera in his hands. Lena searched behind the counter and found an old journal, pages filled with scribbles. She read aloud, "Capture keeps, flash reveals, reverse returns. The camera commands the frame." Evan blinked. "Reverse?" He checked the camera. a hidden lever on the side marked with a reverse arrow. If I can find the right photo, I might pull them back. They scanned the walls. Noah's photo. Kayla's. Dozens of others. Marjorie's voice croaked from the floor, recovering from the blow. Be careful. The wrong photo brings the wrong soul. Evan aimed the camera at Kayla's picture. The lens glowed faintly. He flipped the lever to reverse. He took the shot. The flash burst like lightning, blinding. In the gray world, Noah and Kayla saw a sudden beam of light split the sky. Kayla felt herself being lifted, her body dissolving into particles. Noah! She screamed. She vanished. Noah stood alone. Back in the cafe, Kayla reappeared, collapsing on the floor, gasping for breath. Kayla! Lena cried, helping her up. I saw Noah. He's still there, Kayla whispered, crying. We have to save him. Evan checked the camera. One shot left, but Marjorie laughed darkly. You won't bring him back. The framekeeper owns him now. Evan glared. We'll see. He aimed the camera, but the walls trembled, and a voice whispered from nowhere. You bring one back. We take another. The lights flickered. A shadow moved in the hallway. Someone, or something, was coming. Evan stood ready, the camera aimed. Lena held Kayla close. Marjorie laughed, her bloodied smile wide. The cafe moaned as if it were alive, and Noah, trapped in the gray, dead world, heard footsteps behind him. The framekeeper was getting closer. No way back, unless Evan shot true. Noah Bell ran through the endless gray world, breath sharp in his lungs. Every shadow looked like death. Every sound felt like a trap. His mind buzzed with fear, but also confusion. The more he ran, the harder it became to remember his own name. What was it again? He muttered to himself. Noah Bell. Noah, don't forget. Don't forget. If he forgot, he was dead, or worse. Noah stumbled into an open field where dozens of people sat or stood, but none spoke. They stared blankly, swaying as if the wind could knock them down. One woman caught his eye. Her skin was gray, her lips cracked, but her eyes were still bright. She whispered, Names. Remember your name. What happens if I forget? She shook her head slowly. The framekeeper takes you, then you vanish, forever. Who is that? Noah asked. Her eyes widened. She pointed behind him. Noah turned and saw it, the framekeeper, tall as a house, wrapped in cloth, dragging frames by chains, faces pressed against its skin, as if souls were trapped inside its body, silently screaming. The framekeeper tilted its head. It had no face, but somehow it was looking right at Noah. Then it pointed a long black finger at him. Noah ran. In the cafe, Evan, Lena, and Kayla huddled in the middle of the room. The photos on the walls shifted, eyes moving inside. Frames. Kayla was still shaking after being pulled back from the photo world. There's a thing in there, she whispered. It hunts you. If it catches you, you're gone. Evan gripped the camera tightly. Then we need to pull Noah out before it gets him. Marjorie Finch, sitting against the wall, laughed quietly. You don't understand, she said. This place has rules. That's why the framekeeper exists. Lena glared at her. What rules? Marjorie smiled darkly. 1. If you forget your name, you disappear. 2. If the framekeeper touches you, you're consumed. 3. Only the camera can pull you back, but every pull costs something. What does it cost? Evan asked. Marjorie just smiled wider. Evan studied the camera. The reverse lever glowed faintly, the same way it had when he pulled Kayla back. He checked the back of the device and found something engraved. Balance is owed. One saved, one claimed. His heart sank. Every time they pulled someone back, the framekeeper could claim someone else. I can't let that happen, Evan muttered. We have to try, Lena said. We can't leave Noah. Kayla nodded weakly. I saw him. He's still fighting. Evan made his choice. He aimed the camera at Noah's photo on the wall, flipped the lever to reverse, and took the shot. A flash, blinding, sharp. The walls groaned. Marjorie whispered, "You've made the deal." In the gray world, Noah felt his body lift off the ground, light pulling him upward. But just as he began to dissolve, the framekeeper lunged, its arms stretching unnaturally long. It grabbed Noah's ankle. Noah screamed. Half of him was in light. Half was still trapped. Then, with a cracking sound, the framekeeper's grip broke, and Noah vanished. In the cafe, Noah collapsed onto the floor, gasping. He was back. "Noah!" Lena cried, hugging him. He trembled. I saw it. It touched me. I thought I was dead." Evan knelt beside him. "You're here now." Then the wall shook violently. A new photo appeared on the shelf. A new person inside, face blurred, features melting. Evan stared in horror. "The price," he whispered. "We pulled Noah out, but someone else got pulled in." Marjorie laughed softly. "Balance." Marjorie spoke calmly now, as if lecturing children. "The framekeeper was the first soul I trapped. He was curious. He wanted to escape, but instead he became my collector." "Why?" Lena asked. "Because this place needs balance. Every picture must be filled. A frame is never empty," Kayla sobbed. "You're a monster," Marjorie shrugged. "Better monster than forgotten." The friends stood together. Noah's voice shook. "We have to end this." Evan nodded. "Then we destroy the frames." But Marjorie's eyes glinted. "Be careful. Break the wrong frame, and the souls inside are gone forever." Evan formed a plan. "We find the original frame, the one that started all this. If we destroy that, maybe everything else collapses." "Where is it?" Lena asked. Marjorie smiled. "Buried beneath the cafe, in the basement." Kayla's voice cracked. "There's a basement!" Marjorie nodded. "Of course. That's where the framekeeper first came from. They had no choice. They tied Marjorie's hands and forced her to lead them to a trap door hidden behind the counter. Evan opened it. A cold, damp wind rushed up. Wooden stairs led down into darkness. The air smelled like mold and rot. And somewhere below, something was breathing. Evan looked back at his friends. "We end this tonight." They descended into the dark, flashlight beams shaking. Behind them, the cafe's photos whispered, and in the distance, in another world, the framekeeper stood still, watching, waiting, because no frame stays empty for long. The trapdoor creaked as Evan, Lena, Noah, and Kayla climbed down into the basement beneath Finch's cafe. Their flashlight beams cut through the darkness, but the air was thick and cold. It smelled like dirt, rot, and something worse. Something old. The wooden stairs groaned under their feet. Marjorie Finch's voice echoed from above. "You'll never find it. The cafe protects its heart." Evan ignored her. They reached the basement floor, stepping onto packed earth. Wooden beams supported the ceiling. and along the walls were more frames, leaned against each other like discarded memories. Some of the glass was cracked, faces pressed against the inside, eyes moving, mouths trying to scream. Lena shivered. We have to find the first frame. Noah looked around. How do we know which one it is? Kayla pointed her light at the far wall. There, half buried in the dirt, stood a massive, rotting frame, twice the size of the others. The wood was blackened, the edges splintered. Inside the frame was a swirling shadow, moving like smoke trapped behind glass. Evan stepped closer. That's it. But as they approached, the air grew colder. A deep groan rumbled through the ground. Then they heard it. Footsteps, heavy, slow, getting closer. The shadows shifted. From the far corner of the basement, the framekeeper emerged, taller than before, its body stretched like melted wax. Its face was still wrapped in cloth, but now the cloth was soaked with dark stains. Chains hung from its arms, dragging empty frames behind it, each one screeching on the dirt floor. Noah froze. It's here! The framekeeper raised its head, sensing them. It spoke, not with a mouth, but with a voice that filled their minds. Return to the walls. Fill the frames. Balance must remain. Evan raised the camera. Not this time. The framekeeper roared, a sound like crumbling stone. It charged. They ran. The basement twisted, walls shifting as if alive. Wooden support beams stretched and moved, trying to block their path. The lights on their flashlights flickered. Lena screamed as a hand burst from a nearby frame, trying to grab her ankle. Evan fired the camera. The flash stunned the hand, which recoiled. "We need to get to the big frame," he shouted. But the framekeeper was faster. It moved like shadow, arms extending, grabbing at them. Its fingers brushed Noah's shoulder. His skin burned instantly, leaving black marks. Noah cried out. "It touched me! I can't!" Kayla pulled him away, tears streaming. "Don't stop! Keep moving!" They reached the giant frame. The shadow inside it writhed, faces emerging and fading within the glass. Evan turned to the others. "We destroy this. Maybe everything ends. But how?" Lena asked, breathless. Noah looked down. There was a rusted iron rod half buried in the dirt. Maybe this. He grabbed it, and with all his strength, drove it into the glass. The glass cracked, spiderwebbing from the point of impact. The shadow inside screamed, a high, human-like wail mixed with something inhuman. The framekeeper froze, its head twitching. Evan grabbed a heavy stone and smashed the glass harder. The frame cracked open, and a blast of black smoke exploded outward, knocking them to the ground. They coughed, eyes burning. When the smoke cleared, the big frame was shattered, and in its place stood a doorway, an open portal filled with swirling gray light. The framekeeper screamed again, its body starting to fall apart, bits of shadow peeling away. But it wasn't dead yet. It charged again, enraged. "We have to go through," Evan yelled. He grabbed Lena's hand, pulling her toward the portal. Noah and Kayla followed. They jumped through the light, and everything changed. They landed hard on gray dirt. The sky above was dim and swirling, with no sun, only clouds that moved too fast. Giant frames stood like doorways around them, some empty, some with ghostly figures trapped inside. They were in the photo realm, a prison of frames, souls, and endless fog. Kayla looked around, horrified. "We're inside the photos." In the distance, the framekeeper's roar echoed. It was coming after them, even here. "We need to find the center," Evan said. "There has to be a heart to this place." They ran toward a hill lined with massive, towering frames. Halfway up the hill, the fog thickened, and figures appeared ahead. At first, they looked like strangers. But then the friends saw their faces. Each of them was met by a shadow version of themselves, twisted, pale, with hollow eyes. Lena's shadow stepped forward, voice cold. "You think you can escape? You're part of this now." Evan's shadow smiled cruelly. "You brought this. You're the reason the cafe lives." Noah's shadow whispered. "You're weak, that's why it touched you." Kayla's shadow sobbed. "You forgot us. We're all forgotten." The real friends stood frozen. The framekeeper was still behind them, getting closer. "We don't have time for this," Evan growled. He raised the camera. The shadows lunged. Evan snapped a picture. The flash blasted the shadows back, burning their bodies into smoke. The path cleared. "Go!" Evan yelled. They ran to the top of the hill. At the summit stood a massive frame of pure black stone, pulsing like a heartbeat. Inside it swirled a vortex of souls, faces crying, hands reaching. Out, at its base, sat a red crystal, glowing. Lena stared at it. "That's it. That's the source." The framekeeper climbed the hill behind them, screaming, its body half decayed. Noah coughed. "We have to break it." Kayla picked up a jagged stone. "I'll do it." She ran forward, but the framekeeper reached out, grabbing her by the waist. She screamed as its touch burned her. "Kayla!" Lena shouted, but Kayla smiled weakly. "Do it! Smash it!" Evan grabbed the iron rod from earlier and swung it down onto the red crystal. It cracked. He hit it again. With a loud snap, the crystal shattered. The sky split open with light. The framekeeper howled, its body disintegrating into dust. Kayla dropped to the ground, free, though burned. The ground shook. Everything was collapsing. A new portal opened, a doorway back to the cafe. Evan helped Kayla up. "Go!" he yelled. They ran, the world crumbling around them. The frames fell, breaking into pieces. The cries of trapped souls echoed, but also relief. As if they were being freed, one by one, they jumped through the portal. They collapsed onto the cafe floor. The basement shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. Marjorie Finch stood at the top of the stairs, eyes wide, knowing what they had done. "You fools. You've ruined it." She stumbled back, but before she could escape, the walls of the cafe began to rot and collapse. The photos on the walls burned, one by one, the faces inside finally fading into peace. Evan stood, helping Lena. "Noah and Kayla to their feet. We need to go." They climbed the stairs, escaping the crumbling cafe. Outside, the night air was cold and fresh. Behind them, Finch's cafe collapsed entirely into rubble. They stood in silence, watching the ruins burn. Evan held the camera. Lena whispered, "Is it over?" Evan wasn't sure, but in his pocket, he felt something warm. He pulled it out, a small, untouched photo frame. Inside, a shadow moved faintly. Noah saw it too. "What is that?" Evan stared. "I don't know." But deep inside, he feared the truth. No frame ever stays empty for long. Smoke rose from the ruins of Finch's cafe. The walls had collapsed, the photographs burned to ash, and the strange, glowing frames inside had crumbled. Evan, Lena, Noah, and Kayla stood in the cold air, shivering not just from the chill, but from the memory of the framekeeper. Its face, its voice, its endless hunger. "I think it's over," Lena whispered, but Evan wasn't so sure. His hand brushed his pocket. The small photograph he had pulled out from the photo realm still burned faintly warm. He didn't tell the others yet. Not yet. They needed rest. They needed peace. But peace wouldn't come. The next day, they found shelter in a nearby abandoned barn. They lit a fire and tried to sleep. Kayla's burns from the framekeeper were healing slowly, but she still trembled. Noah sat beside her, holding her hand. Lena watched Evan carefully. "You've been quiet." Evan stared at the photograph in his hand when no one was looking. "I just want to be sure," he said softly. But that was a lie. Because in the photo, a shadow moved, faint but visible. A shape standing in the fog, watching. The framekeeper wasn't fully gone, and part of Evan didn't want it to be. Later that night, Evan crept away from the barn holding the photo. He studied it by moonlight. "What are you?" he whispered, as if hearing him. The shadow inside the photo lifted its head. A whisper echoed in Evan's mind. "I'm not finished." Evan nearly dropped it. Then the shadow spoke again, soft as wind. "One more sacrifice. Free them all." "What do you mean, one life for the door to close forever?" Evan knew what it meant. One of them had to stay behind, forever trapped, to seal the photo realm for good. If not, the frames would return. The framekeeper would rise again. Evan's heart raced. He knew who it had to be. Morning came. Evan gathered. "The others. There's still a connection. The photo realm isn't gone. I can feel it." Noah frowned. "What do we do?" "I have to go back," Evan said. "Finish it." "No," Lena snapped. "We do it together." Evan shook his head. "If we all go back, one of us might never return." They argued, but Evan's mind was made up. He held the photo close, and before anyone could stop him, he whispered, "Take me back." Light burst. Around him, blinding, he vanished. Evan stood alone in the gray wasteland again. The sky churned. The ground was cracked and cold. Ahead stood the framekeeper, reborn but smaller, weaker, its form barely holding together. "You returned," it rasped. Evan held the photograph tightly. "I'm ending this." The framekeeper smiled beneath its wrappings. "One must stay. You stay, they go." Evan knew the price. But then he heard voices behind him. Lena, Noah, and Kayla. They had followed. "Evan!" Lena cried. "You shouldn't have come." He shouted. "We're not letting you die alone," Noah said. The framekeeper roared. "Then one of you stays forever." The ground split, and the sky darkened. Frames burst from the earth, spinning in the air. The framekeeper charged. Evan tried to push Lena back, but she held on to him. Kayla screamed, "There has to be another way!" But the framekeeper grabbed Noah, its grip burning him. Noah's body began to glow, his skin cracking. "I'll do it," Noah gasped. "Let me." But Evan pulled him free. "I called this. I finish it." He ran forward, holding the photograph. Like a weapon, the framekeeper reached for him, but Evan leapt into its chest, pushing the photograph into its core. Light exploded. The photo realm shattered like glass. The frames cracked, souls flying free, turning into light. Lena, Kayla, and Noah were thrown back, landing hard. They opened their eyes. They were in the real world again, but Evan wasn't there. In the ruins of the cafe, a new frame hung from a piece of standing wall. Evan's face inside it, but he wasn't screaming. He was smiling, peaceful. Lena sobbed, touching the glass. Noah whispered, "He did it." Kayla added, "He saved us." The cafe was gone. The framekeeper was dead. The photo realm collapsed, but the frame with Evan's face remained, because some sacrifices become stories, and stories live forever, even Inside a frame, the ruins of Finch's cafe stood quiet. Charred wood, crumbled stone, blackened walls. But one thing remained untouched. A single photograph, still hanging on a jagged piece of wood. Evan's face, inside the frame. He wasn't screaming. He wasn't crying. He was smiling, soft and peaceful. His eyes followed the wind, as if still watching the world. Lena, Noah, and Kayla stood before it, unable to speak. Lena pressed her hand to the glass. He stayed behind, she whispered. Kayla wiped her tears. To save us. Noah swallowed hard. We should destroy it. Let him rest. But Lena shook her head. No. He deserves to be remembered. They stood in silence, the sky gray and heavy. Then they left, the photograph left standing alone among the ashes, but something moved inside the frame. A shadow, barely there, but waiting, because some frames are never empty for long. Years later, the land where Finch's cafe once stood grew wild. Weeds overtook the ruins, trees crept in, but the photograph remained, untouched, not weathered by time. One day, a family passed by, tourists exploring the countryside, a mother, father, and their young daughter. They stumbled upon the ruins. What was this place? The father asked. The mother shrugged. Looks like an old cafe. Then the daughter, small and curious, wandered ahead. Mommy, there's a picture. She pointed to the photograph of Evan, still hanging. The family approached. He looks happy, the mother said, but the girl stared closer. There's someone else in there. What do you mean? Her father asked. She pointed again. Behind the man, in the shadows. They squinted, and for a moment just a flicker. They saw it, a dark shape, the frame keeper. The air grew colder. The family stepped back, unease, creeping into their bones. Then, from nowhere, a faint whisper. Come closer. The little girl froze. Did you hear that? She asked. But her parents didn't. They were already heading back to the car. The girl stared at the photo one last time. The shadow inside shifted. Then, the girl smiled and followed her parents back. But behind her, the photograph pulsed faintly with light. The frame keeper was still there, waiting. Because some doors never truly close, and some stories never end. That night, as the moon hung full and heavy, a cold wind swept through the ruins. The photograph of Evan glowed briefly, then cracked. Not broken, not destroyed, but split just enough to let something out. A shape formed in the darkness, tall, thin, draped in shadow. It stood, stretching arms long and bony. It was free. The frame keeper. It looked around at the empty frames scattered in the dirt, and it smiled beneath its cloth-covered face. Time to start a new collection. It vanished into the night. Somewhere else, another cafe waits to be built. Another wall ready to be filled. Because no frame stays empty. Not forever. Story 3. The town of Ridgewood was small, quiet, and mostly forgotten by the world. It sat cradled between dark woods and mist-covered hills, the kind of place where strangers rarely visited, and those who left seldom returned. But on a gray, rain-heavy morning, a car rolled into Ridgewood. Behind the wheel was Eric Dalton, a documentary filmmaker returning after years away. In the back of his car, packed neatly, were cameras, microphones, and tripods, tools of his trade. But he hadn't come back for nostalgia or family. He had come for a story that sounded too bizarre to believe. News had spread like wildfire online. A girl named Grace Whitmore, who had been declared dead, had risen during her funeral. The dead, they said, didn't stay dead in Ridgewood anymore. Eric didn't believe in miracles, but he did believe in footage. And if the story was true, it would make his career. As Eric drove through town, the streets seemed emptier than he remembered. Shops were closed, windows boarded up. The sky hung low, threatening rain that never quite fell. Ridgewood felt wrong, as if the air itself had turned stale. At a small, rotting motel near the town's edge, Eric reunited with his old friend Owen Carter, his cameraman, and Harper Reed, their sound technician. Both looked uneasy, but ready. Owen gestured at the gear. "You sure about this?" Eric shrugged. "If a dead girl really woke up, I want it on film." Harper glanced nervously at the forest beyond the motel. "You heard the other part, right? People are saying it wasn't a miracle." Eric chuckled. "People say a lot of things. That's why we're here, to find the truth." Their first stop was the town's church, where Grace's funeral had taken place. The building stood tall but tired, its steeple rusted, its doors barely holding onto their hinges. Inside, the air was damp and heavy with the scent of old wood and dust. There they met Father Sullivan, the local priest, an old man with sunken eyes and hands that shook slightly as he clutched a Bible. "I know why you're here," Sullivan said quietly, "but I suggest you leave." Eric asked him plainly, "We heard Grace Whitmore rose from the dead. Is that true?" The priest stared hard at him. "She stood up, alive, breathing, her eyes different. Different how?" Father Sullivan shook his head. "Empty. Like she was seeing something no one else could." Harper whispered, "Was it a possession?" Sullivan's lips pressed together. "I won't speak blasphemy, but whatever brought her back wasn't holy." He looked out the stained glass window toward the woods. "They say she walks there at night. That the woods listen to her." The team filmed everything, but even through the lens, the church felt colder, heavier. Something watched them, though no eyes were present. Night approached with the sky bruised purple and black. The air grew colder than it should have in spring. Eric insisted they follow the trail behind the church that led into the woods. Locals whispered that Grace was seen disappearing among the trees, followed by others. The camera lights flickered as they walked. The forest was dense, the trees gnarled, their branches clawing at the sky like dead hands. The ground was soft with rot, every step sinking slightly. Then they heard it, a voice singing. A woman's voice, soft, mournful, carrying through the dark. Owen steadied the camera. "That's her." They crept closer. Between the trees, Grace Whitmore stood in a clearing, her white funeral dress stained with dirt. Around her stood a circle of people, all staring at her in silence, their faces blank. Grace's head was tilted upward, eyes white as bone, her mouth moving as she whispered to the sky. Then, from the trees beyond, figures emerged. People, long dead, their bodies pale, some bearing wounds that should have killed them. One by one, they gathered around Grace. Harper gasped. "What is this?" The camera captured it all. The dead stood obediently around Grace, waiting, listening. Then Grace stopped singing. She turned her head and looked directly into the camera lens. Eric's blood turned to ice. She shouldn't have seen them. Not from that distance, not in the dark. Grace smiled, and in that moment, the forest whispered in hundreds of voices at once. "The hollow saint is waking." The dead turned their heads, eyes empty, and began to move toward Eric and his team. Panic erupted. They ran, tripping over roots, the camera shaking wildly as Owen tried to keep filming even while fleeing. Behind them, the dead did not run. They glided, moving faster than they should, closing the distance with unnatural speed. Harper screamed as cold hands reached out from the dark, but Eric pulled her forward, outpacing the grasping figures. Only when the motel lights glimmered ahead did the dead stop. They stood just at the edge of the trees, unmoving, watching, breathless and shaking. The crew collapsed inside the motel room, locking the doors, though deep down they knew locks wouldn't matter. Owen played back the footage. The camera had captured everything. Grace, the dead, the whisper in the woods. But on the final frame as they ran, there was a face. A face in the dark between trees, vast and hollow, like a mask made of shadows. The Hollow Saint. The legend the town whispered was real, and it was watching them. This was no longer just a documentary. It was a warning, and they had no idea if they would survive long enough to tell the story. Morning in Ridgewood did little to banish the previous night's terror. The sun was weak, barely more than a pale smudge behind clouds. Yet even its feeble light could not erase the memory of the dead standing in the woods, staring from beneath the trees. In the motel room, Eric Dalton, Owen Carter, and Harper Reed sat in silence, the air heavy. The footage they captured was undeniable. Grace Whitmore was alive, and she was not alone. The dead followed her, yet what chilled them most was the whispered name caught on audio playback. The Hollow Saint is waking. Harper stared out the window, her eyes glassy with exhaustion. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the face in the dark, a hollow visage like a mask, with no eyes, only the suggestion of where a face should be. Eric stood abruptly. "We need answers. The town knows something." Owen nodded. "Then we talk to them," before they stopped talking at all. They ventured into the town's narrow streets. The air smelled of mildew and rain-soaked wood. Few people walked outside, and those who did hurried past with heads down, avoiding eye contact. At the diner, one of the last open places, the crew met an old man named Walt Hargrove, who had lived in Ridgewood all his life. He agreed to talk, on camera but with conditions. He didn't want his face shown. "I seen the dead," Walt whispered, voice raspy. "Not just Grace, others. Dead men I buried myself walking around like nothing happened." Eric leaned closer. "What are they?" Walt's eyes flicked to the window. "We called it a curse. My granddaddy called it the Hollow Saint's blessing. But it ain't no blessing." Harper asked, "What is the Hollow Saint?" Walt swallowed hard. "An old spirit. They say long before this town people worshipped it. A thing that could bring back the dead, but twisted." He looked at them then, eyes filled with an old terror. "You ever see something with no face, no soul? That's the saint. It don't want worship, it wants vessels." Eric recorded every word. Walt warned them before leaving, "If you see your dead kin walking again, run." By dusk, news spread faster than wildfire in the small town. Another resurrection. This time, an elderly woman named Martha Bell, dead for 3 weeks, was seen walking through the churchyard. Eric and his crew rushed there, cameras ready. They found Martha standing by her own gravestone, head bowed, lips moving silently. Dozens of townsfolk stood around, murmuring prayers, some weeping in joy, others frozen in fear. Eric pushed through the crowd. "Martha!" She didn't look up. Instead, She raised her head slightly, revealing empty sockets where her eyes once were. Yet she saw everything. She whispered, "He comes to collect. The saint is mercy. The saint is hollow." The people gasped as Martha turned and began walking slowly toward the woods, her body stiff but determined. Others followed, not just the dead, but the living, pulled as if by invisible strings. Harper whispered, "They're going to Grace." Eric recorded until Martha's form disappeared between the trees. The dead weren't just back. They were gathering. That night, desperate for clarity, the crew returned to the church to confront Father Sullivan again. The old priest awaited them in his quarters, sitting beneath a wooden cross. "You've seen them," he said without turning. "They've come," Eric demanded. "What is the Hollow Saint?" Sullivan sighed deeply. It was a false god, born from death itself, a spirit that promised to reunite families by reviving the dead. But every resurrection comes with a price. The dead don't return alone. "What do they bring?" Harper asked. Sullivan's face turned gray. "An opening, a door between our world and something worse. A realm of rot and hunger." He revealed an old book, pages yellowed, depicting crude drawings of a faceless figure draped in shadows, surrounded by corpses. "They say when enough dead walk again, the saint himself will cross into our world." Noah's eyes darkened. "How many more before that happens?" Sullivan answered with dread. "Enough to build a congregation." Leaving the church, the air felt heavier. The streets were now emptier than ever. Occasionally, figures could be seen standing still, staring down alleys or through windows. Eric noticed something chilling. His name whispered on the wind. He turned, but no one stood nearby. Later, back at the motel, Harper awoke from a nightmare. But the voice from her dream followed her into waking. "You're already marked." She checked her reflection. On her neck, faint but visible in the mirror under the right light, were dark handprints, as if something invisible had touched her in the woods. She hadn't felt it then, but the saint had touched her. Eric and Owen saw it too, their faces draining of color. They realized the truth. They had already been seen, already chosen. The town of Ridgewood no longer slept. By day, streets remained mostly empty. But by night, shadows grew bold. Windows glowed faintly with candlelight, though no one stood inside watching. In every corner of Ridgewood, the dead wandered, and the living began to change. Eric Dalton, Owen Carter, and Harper Reed stayed hidden during daylight, confined to the musty motel room. But when dusk came, so too did the whispers, carried on the wind like disease. That night, as the sun bled away, Eric caught movement outside their window. Figures, both dead and alive, gathered silently in the distance, moving toward the woods. There were too many of them now, more than the previous night, more than the previous week. It was time to follow them, time to see where this path of death led. They followed cautiously, their camera light dimmed to avoid notice. Beyond the tree line, in a wide clearing surrounded by skeletal trees, the procession stopped. There stood Grace Whitmore, still dressed, in her soiled funeral gown, her eyes pale and unblinking. Around her, dozens of Ridgewood citizens gathered, their eyes just as empty. But tonight, they weren't silent. A low chant began, guttural, wordless sounds that vibrated through the earth. At the center of the circle stood a tall wooden totem, fashioned crudely from bones, sticks, and strips of cloth. Around its base, candles flickered, and strange symbols of rot and circles of thorns were carved into the dirt. And then he appeared. Not fully formed, but enough. A shape between the trees, tall, cloaked in shadow, a faceless figure standing impossibly still. He stood behind Grace, his form wavering like smoke, yet undeniably real. The Hollow Saint had come to his people. From the crowd, a man stepped forward. Mayor Martin Blake, once the town's proud leader, now hollow-eyed and eager. He raised his arms. "We welcome you, Saint of the Hollow. We offer ourselves. We beg your mercy." The Hollow Saint did not speak, but his presence sank into the bones of every living thing. Harper clutched Eric's sleeve, whispering, "They're worshipping it." Owen zoomed the camera, breath shaking. "They're building a cult." Then, Blake turned, addressing the crowd. "The saint offers salvation through resurrection, but the price is blood, and we must pay it." At his signal, 2 men dragged forward a captive, a drifter who had wandered into town days ago, tied and gagged. Grace approached, her pale hands caressing the man's face gently, before she produced a rusted dagger, serrated and stained dark. She whispered, her voice distant, "Your body is hollow. Let it be filled." Then she cut. The drifter's screams echoed briefly before he collapsed, throat opened. The ground absorbed his blood, and the Hollow Saint's form grew more defined, as if the sacrifice fed him directly, as the blood soaked. "The earth!" Harper staggered, clutching her head. Visions flooded her mind, flashes of a blackened world, endless frames of dead faces, all screaming but silent. She saw herself, pale and lifeless, standing amongst them, her mouth sewn shut. Then she heard his voice, soft but deep, coming from everywhere. "You are marked. Soon you will carry me." She collapsed. Eric caught her, panic in his eyes. "We need to leave, now." They retreated, unnoticed, their camera still recording. Back at the motel, Harper explained her vision. The Hollow Saint was growing stronger. Every sacrifice brought him closer to fully crossing over. But Owen was missing. In their panic, they hadn't noticed. Owen had not made it back with them. Eric cursed himself. "We left him behind." But Harper shook her head. "No. They took him." In the camera's footage, the last few frames showed Owen trying to get a better angle, before 2 townsfolk grabbed him from behind. Owen was now with the cult. Eric refused to abandon him. Against Harper's pleading, they prepared, gathering what tools they had: cameras, flashlights, a crowbar. That night, they returned to the woods. Deeper than before, past the first clearing, they found a ruined chapel, stone walls cracked, and ivy-choked. Faint candlelight flickered within. Inside, the cult gathered again. Owen was tied to the altar, struggling weakly. Mayor Blake stood over him, Grace by his side. "The Hollow Saint needs his vessel," Blake announced. "One of them will carry him." But then the air shifted, cold, suffocating. The Hollow Saint appeared within the chapel's shadows, taller than before, its form complete but its face still an empty hollow. Its voice, layered with countless others, filled the room. "Bring me the marked one." The crowd turned. They looked directly toward the doorway, toward Harper. She was the marked one. Eric swung the crowbar, knocking back the first cultist to charge. Chaos erupted. Grace moved in unnatural speed, her smile unchanging, her eyes never blinking. Eric reached Owen, cutting his bonds. Harper, trembling, faced the Hollow Saint, who loomed, filling the chapel with his towering shadow. "Come," he whispered. "You are empty inside." But Harper screamed, and something within her resisted. Her scream shook the walls as if her soul itself rejected him. The hollow saint staggered, his form flickering. Eric dragged Owen to his feet. "We need to burn this place." Together, they overturned candles, setting fire to the rotting wood, and dry vines. Flames climbed quickly. The cult panicked. Some tried to extinguish the flames. Others dropped to their knees, praying to the saint. But the hollow saint did not burn. He stood, watching, as the fire roared. Then he whispered one word. "Soon," and his form dissolved into black smoke, vanishing into the night. The three escaped the burning chapel, breathless and burned. Behind them, screams of the cult echoed, mingling with the crackle of flame. They had escaped. For now. But as they looked back, they knew the hollow saint wasn't dead, just waiting, growing. The flames that consumed the ruined chapel cast an eerie glow over the woods of Ridgewood. The cult screamed within, trapped by their own devotion. But the hollow saint did not burn. He vanished like smoke, leaving behind a silence heavier than death. Eric, Harper, and a wounded Owen stumbled through the trees, their breaths sharp and shallow. They didn't speak until they saw the distant lights of the motel, a pale reminder of the world beyond madness. But the darkness they escaped carried a stain, one that grew inside Harper with every step. Inside the motel room, Harper stood before the bathroom mirror, examining the faint handprints on her neck. But tonight, they had deepened. The bruises darkened, and beneath her skin, veins pulsed black, as though something beneath was alive. She touched her throat and heard a voice inside her head. "You are mine." She recoiled, gasping. Her reflection flickered, and for a moment, the face in the mirror wasn't hers. It was hollow-eyed, with a mouth stitched closed. Harper screamed. Eric and Owen rushed in to find her trembling, eyes wide with horror. "There's something inside me," she whispered. "It's him." That night, Harper dreamt of a world where the sky was ash and the ground cracked like old bones. She walked among rows of frames, each holding a screaming face trapped behind glass. At the center of this wasteland stood the hollow saint, towering, and still, his face a bottomless void, his voice many. "When your mind breaks, your body will be my vessel." Harper woke with a gasp, sweat dripping from her skin. The bruises on her neck had spread across her collarbone, forming symbols, circles of thorns and hollow eyes. She was changing. Eric knew they couldn't fight what they didn't understand. So they returned to the church to confront Father Sullivan, once more. But they found him differently this time. In his quarters, the priest sat weeping, the Bible open in his lap. His hands trembled, his eyes sunken deep. "I failed," Sullivan muttered. "I thought faith could keep it away." Eric demanded answers. "How do we stop him?" Sullivan stared at Harper's marks and whispered, "You can't." But then he spoke of the crypt beneath the church, a sealed place older than Ridgewood itself, built atop the burial ground of the saint's first victims. "If there's any way to break his reach, it's there," Sullivan said. "But you won't return the same." That night, they pried open the stone trapdoor beneath the church, revealing a spiraling staircase of damp stone. The air reeked of decay. They descended, lights flickering, until they entered a chamber of bones. Skulls lined the walls, their empty sockets watching. In the center stood a throne of bones, and upon it, a massive, cracked red crystal pulsing faintly. Harper stepped closer, as if drawn by an invisible thread. Owen tried to hold her back, but she muttered, "I can hear him. He's here." Then the shadows gathered. From every corner of the crypt, figures formed, not cultists, but shadows with human shapes, faceless and silent. They moved slowly, surrounding them. Eric gripped a torch, holding them at bay. But then, Harper collapsed, clutching her head. The Hollow Saint's voice filled the chamber. The door opens. She is the key. The red crystal flared, and Harper screamed. Her eyes turned white. Her mouth moved, but the words were not hers. She stood, slowly, her body slack, her voice layered and deep. I see you, Eric. I see your fear. You cannot stop. Me! Eric pleaded with her. Fight him, Harper! But she smiled, the saint's smile cold and wide. Owen shouted, We have to destroy the crystal! He grabbed a nearby bone shard, driving it into the crystal, but it only cracked slightly. The shadows attacked. Eric fought them back with fire, the shadows hissing and retreating, but Harper's body convulsed, torn between herself and the saint. Then, her own voice broke through. Kill me before he takes me. Eric couldn't. Instead, he grabbed the bone shard and struck the crystal again and again, until with a deafening crack, the crystal shattered. The shadows screamed and evaporated into dust. Harper collapsed, eyes rolling back, breath shallow. Silence returned. Harper lived, but barely. Her body bore the marks still, but the voice inside her was quieter, distant. The Hollow Saint had not won, yet. But the crypt walls whispered, the bones humming. Owen helped Eric carry Harper back to the surface. Above ground, the church stood cold, its walls groaning as if the building itself mourned. But in the woods beyond, they knew the Hollow Saint still waited. And he was not finished. The church was no longer a sanctuary. The crypt beneath had shaken the very walls with ancient cries, but the true terror still waited in the woods, growing bolder with each night. Eric Dalton, Harper Reed, and Owen Carter stood together in the gray morning light, battered and sleepless. Harper's body still bore the marks of the Hollow Saint, but his voice inside her had grown distant since the crystal's destruction. Distant, not gone. In the woods, the cult still gathered, their numbers swollen with both the dead and the living. The Hollow Saints' congregation was nearly complete, and then it would be too late. We end this tonight, Eric said, his voice grim. They prepared, bottles filled with gasoline, torches wrapped and ready. If the Hollow Saint was to be stopped, the crypt had to burn. The source, the connection, everything. But deep down, they knew it wouldn't be enough. Because the Hollow Saint wanted Harper. He wanted her as his vessel, and he was coming. As dusk bled into night, they returned to the woods, the air heavy with mist and rot. They reached the clearing where the burned chapel once stood, now reduced to ash and bone. But beyond it, deeper, in the forest, fires glowed. There, in a hollowed cavern beneath twisted trees, the cult gathered. The mayor, Martin Blake, stood before them, eyes black as tar, preaching to the dead and the brainwashed. And behind him, a shadow, vast, hollow, watching. The Hollow Saint Blake raised his hands. Tonight, the vessel is claimed. The gate will open, and the dead will inherit the earth. Grace Whitmore, still dressed in her funeral shroud, stood silently, her mouth sewn shut, eyes staring at nothing. Harper stepped forward, breath trembling. She could feel the saint calling her, pulling her soul forward. Owen and Eric lit the Molotovs. We do this fast, Eric whispered. They hurled the bottles. Flames erupted among the cultists, screams tearing through the night. Bodies burned, some falling silent, others rising still aflame, untouched by pain. Eric charged with the crowbar, swinging wildly. Owen followed, torch in hand. Harper stood still, her mind slipping as the saint's voice flooded her thoughts. Give, yourself. Be my mouth. My eyes. But she screamed, fighting the invasion. The hollow saint's form solidified, taller than the trees, faceless, arms like pillars of shadow. He stepped forward and spoke aloud for the first time. I was born. In the hollow, you will fill me. The cultists attacked, wild and frenzied. Eric and Owen fought desperately, blood and fire painting the forest. Harper collapsed, the marks on her body glowing, the possession nearing completion. Eric saw her fall, and knew. If Harper was taken, all was lost. He ran to her, dodging cultists, his torch bright, but the saint reached for Harper, a hand of black fog descending. Eric threw himself between them, torch raised. Not her. Take me. The hollow saint paused. You offer? Eric nodded, but then Owen, wounded, gasping, tackled Eric away. No, take me. The saint laughed, a sound like bones snapping. All hollow, all empty. I will take you all. Harper, with the last of her strength, stood. She grabbed the torch, her voice clear, her eyes burning. No, you get me, but not them. She plunged the torch into her own chest, flames erupting across her body. The saint screamed, a sound that shook the sky. The flame spread unnaturally, burning not flesh, but the possession itself, severing the saint's grip. The hollow saint's form cracked, shadow peeling away, his body unraveling. The cult collapsed, the dead turning to dust. Harper's body fell, burning but smiling, free. The hollow saint let out one final cry, I am not finished. And then, he was gone. Morning light touched Ridgewood. The cult was dead. The dead were truly dead. Eric and Owen stood in the smoldering clearing, Harper's ashes scattered by the wind. They had won, but at a cost. The hollow saint was gone, for now. But in the quiet woods, in the shadows under old trees, the air whispered faintly, not finished. Because things that are hollow always seek to be filled again. Ridgewood was dead. The cult was gone. The dead were dust. The woods stood still for the first time in weeks. And yet, even in daylight, shadows clung to the trees like stains that would never wash away. Eric Dalton and Owen Carter stood at the edge of the forest. The ground still blackened where Harper Reed had burned herself to destroy the hollow saint. Her ashes scattered with the morning breeze, but her final scream still echoed in their minds. They had survived. But the cost was carved deep. Their gear, cameras, tapes, recordings, all survived the fire. Every image, every whisper, every horror was captured. Proof of everything. And yet Eric felt no victory. Only an emptiness that grew larger the longer he stood in Ridgewood. We should leave, Owen said, voice hoarse. There's nothing left. Eric stared into the woods a moment longer, listening. There was no sound, no birds, no wind, only silence. They turned and left Ridgewood behind. Back in the city, weeks later, Eric locked himself in his studio apartment, watching the footage over and over. Every frame was soaked in dread. The dead returning, the cult's madness, Harper's possession, and her sacrifice. But one piece of footage stood out. During one of the final scenes, as Harper burned, a shadow slipped through the frame. A silhouette not shaped like any person. The hollow saint. Even in death, it had escaped. Owen refused to watch anymore. He told Eric, "We should destroy it, all of it, burn the tapes." But Eric couldn't. The world needed to see. People had to know what was waiting in places like Ridgewood. So he began to cut the footage together. The documentary was never completed, because the more Eric watched, the more he changed. One morning, Eric woke with a pain in his neck. In the mirror, he saw it. Faint, but real. A handprint, the same as Harper's. At night, the whisper returned. "You are hollow. I will fill you." Eric tried to fight it, but sleep made him weak. And each time he slept, he dreamt of the photo. Realm. Endless frames, trapped faces, and in the distance, the hollow saint growing clearer, closer. He called Owen in panic, but Owen never answered. When police arrived at Owen's apartment, they found the door open. The equipment was still there, the footage untouched, but Owen was gone. Not a trace, as if he had never existed. Only a single photograph sat on his desk, a picture of Owen, smiling. Yet in the reflection behind him stood a faint, faceless figure. Eric knew then the hollow saint had taken him. Eric recorded one last message on tape, his voice tired, hollow. "If you find this, don't watch the footage. Burn it. If you hear the whispers, it's already too late. He doesn't need worship. He needs empty vessels." The tape ended. Eric disappeared days later. His apartment was empty, except for one photograph on the table. Eric, staring directly into the lens, smiling. In the corner of the photo, a shadow stretched longer than a man, faceless, waiting. Some say the footage leaked online, spreading like a virus, hidden in dark forums. Those who watched it claimed to hear whispers days later. They saw shadows move when no one was there. Some vanished. Some left behind only photos. Because the hollow saint was never destroyed, only patient. And his congregation is never full, because there is always another hollow soul to fill. Story 4. The invitation arrived in a black envelope, its wax seal stamped with a crest no one recognized. 2 ravens clutching a blood-red cross. Marla Grant turned the envelope over, her curiosity prickling. She was a documentary filmmaker, always chasing the obscure, the forgotten. This one was different. The address was handwritten, ink slightly smudged, but the location was unmistakable. Hawthorne Manor, Amityville. She'd heard the stories. Everyone had. The Amityville house, the murders, the hauntings, the whispers of curses. But Hawthorne Manor wasn't that house. This was something else. A funeral home built on the outskirts, deeper in the rot of the town's bones, where trees bent unnaturally and the air hung heavier than it should. The letter was an invitation for an exclusive interview with the manor's owner, Victor Hawthorne, a reclusive historian and mortician. He claimed his family had ties to Amityville's blood-soaked past, secrets never before revealed to the public. Marla was skeptical, but intrigued. The production company barely blinked before approving her request for funding. Paranormal documentaries sold, and the words Amityville and undisclosed footage were a jackpot. She quickly assembled her team. Derek, the sound guy, skeptical and always sarcastic. Eli, the cameraman, who claimed he didn't. Scare easy. Tess, the researcher, obsessed with the occult. Jenna, the assistant producer, who'd tagged along more for the paycheck than the thrill. By the time they arrived in Amityville, the sky was bruised with dusk, clouds bloated and low, as if watching them. The road to Hawthorne Manor was narrow, flanked by dead trees, their limbs like the fingers of a starved corpse. The house appeared suddenly, looming, gray-stoned, windows tall and thin like slit eyes. They parked, engine ticking. No other cars. Jenna shifted uncomfortably. I thought we were interviewing a historian. Why does this look like the set of a Hammer horror film? Marla stepped out first. The air was colder than it should have been for autumn. At the grand doors, she hesitated before knocking with the iron knocker, a heavy thing shaped like a wolf's head. The knock echoed, as if bouncing through an empty cathedral. The door creaked open slowly. No one stood behind it. "Victor Hawthorne?" Marla called. Silence. Then a voice, deep and smooth as oil. "Please, come in." They exchanged looks. Then, one by one, they crossed the threshold. Inside, the air was thick with dust and something sharper. Iron, maybe. Blood, maybe. The walls were lined with portraits, faces pale and severe, their eyes too lifelike. Candles flickered in iron sconces, casting long shadows. Victor Hawthorne stood waiting in the parlor. Tall, impossibly tall, skin pale as bone, hair jet black, and slicked back. He wore a dark suit that looked centuries old but pristine. His eyes, they didn't shine, didn't reflect light. They swallowed it. "Welcome," Victor said, bowing slightly. "I've been expecting you." Marla introduced her team, her voice steady, despite the knot tightening in her gut. Victor's presence was wrong. Not threatening, just off. "I'm honored," Victor continued, "to have my family's history documented. It deserves remembrance." Tess perked up. "You mentioned your family's ties to the incidents here in Amityville?" Victor smiled thinly. "Oh yes, much older than that house on Ocean Avenue. The blood of Amityville runs deeper than a single address." He led them through the manor, the floorboards groaning beneath their feet. There was a faint sound beneath it all. A humming? No, a murmur. Like voices far below, just beyond understanding. Victor opened a set of ornate double doors, revealing the grand hall. It was both beautiful and repulsive. Gilded chandeliers hung above a long dining table set for a feast, yet dust and cobwebs adorned every surface. "We'll begin interviews here tomorrow," Victor said. "Tonight, you are my guests. You must be tired from your journey." Marla hesitated. "We thought we'd stay in town." Victor's smile widened. "I insist. The house is quite accommodating, and it dislikes being left alone." A shiver crawled down Marla's spine. Still, the team agreed. Free room and board were always a bonus, even in a house that felt like it watched you. They were shown to rooms on the second floor. Each was decorated in Victorian elegance, beds with high canopies, curtains so heavy they smothered the light. Eli joked, "If I wake up to a vampire staring at me, I'm punching first and asking questions later." No one laughed. As night deepened, the house settled. But not quietly. Floors creaked with footsteps that didn't belong to any of them. A piano played briefly on its own, notes sour and strained. Marla couldn't sleep. She lay staring at the ceiling, the candlelight from her nightstand flickering. Then, soft footsteps outside her door. She sat up, listening. A low voice whispered her name. "Marla." She froze. "Marla." She stood, heart thudding, and crept to the door. She pressed her ear against it. Silence. Then a knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. She opened it. The hallway was empty, but the air smelled of rot, and something wet squelched under her bare foot. She looked down. red smears leading toward the staircase. A sound from behind, her candle extinguished. She spun, expecting a shadow, a hand, something. But there was only cold air. Then the whisper again, closer, against her ear. "Don't stay. He's still hungry." Marla fled back into her room, locking the door, heart racing. She didn't sleep. Morning came sluggishly. Over breakfast, no one looked rested. Jenna was pale. Eli refused to talk about the thing he'd seen pacing his room. And Tess claimed someone had stood at her window, watching, even though they were on the second floor. Victor entered, smiling as if nothing was wrong. "Sleep well?" he asked. No one answered. "Excellent," he said regardless. "Shall we begin?" As Marla set up for the interview, her mind buzzed with dread. This wasn't a house. It was a throat, and they'd all just stepped deeper into its mouth. The morning brought no comfort. The sun's weak rays barely penetrated the mansion's heavy drapes, casting more shadow than light. When Marla awoke, the faint memory of that whisper still coiled around her neck, as if she'd only just escaped a noose in her sleep. At breakfast, Victor Hawthorne waited at the end of the long dining table, his posture unnaturally straight, eyes fixed on his guests. The spread before them was lavish, fresh fruit, pastries, meats, cheeses, but nothing looked freshly made. The meat bled too dark, the bread was slightly stiff, and the fruit was cold to the touch. "Eat," Victor encouraged, gesturing smoothly. "You'll need your strength for today's discoveries." The crew exchanged glances. Marla took a small bite of bread, barely chewing. The others nibbled half-heartedly. The only one who ate with some appetite was Tess, curious and insistent that she wasn't easily spooked. When the meal was over, Victor led them into the grand hall where the interview would take place. The room smelled of old wood and something beneath it, metallic and sour. Victor sat in a grand chair, velvet faded and threadbare, while Eli set up the camera. "Shall we begin?" Victor asked, voice low, like distant thunder. Marla nodded and sat opposite him, microphone clipped on, notebook in hand. "Tell us about Hawthorne Manor," she prompted. Victor smiled thinly. "This manor was built long before Amityville was even named," he began. "My family were caretakers of the dead. Morticians, yes, but more than that. Keepers of rites, protectors of passage. We prepared not only bodies, but souls." Marla frowned. "You believe in souls?" Victor's eyes twinkled with a glint that wasn't light. "I do. Because I've held them. Briefly." Tess perked up from the corner, notebook in hand. "How does one hold a soul?" she asked. Victor tilted his head. "Through blood. Through ritual. My ancestors learned that blood retains memory, spirit, power. And here, beneath these very floors, lies the original crypt, where the first Hawthorns fed on more than just stories." Eli chuckled dryly behind the camera. "Fed on what, exactly?" Victor's eyes shifted to Eli, and the room felt colder. "On what was necessary." A beat of silence. Victor chuckled softly. "I jest, of course. Shall we continue?" Marla cleared her throat, moving on, though her skin prickled with unease. "People say the manor is haunted," she said. "Is there truth to that?" "Haunted?" Victor mused. "Perhaps. But haunted by what? Or who? That's the question, isn't it?" His grin revealed teeth slightly too sharp. Suddenly the power flickered. The chandeliers dimmed, shadows stretching unnaturally long against the walls. Eli muttered, "What the hell?" The power surged back, but for a split second, Marla swore she saw something in the corner of the room. A tall figure, gaunt and rotted. watching silently before melting into shadow. Marla forced herself to stay composed. "We'll need shots of the crypt," she said. Victor's smile never faltered. In due time, the crew took a break, wandering separately to gather B-roll footage. Marla paced the upper hallway, capturing shots of the grotesque paintings, each one more disturbing than the last. Faces elongated, eyes gouged, mouths stitched. She paused at one portrait of a woman in a black veil, her eyes hollowed pits, mouth sewn shut with gold thread. The plaque read, "Isadora Hawthorne, the Silent Bride." As she filmed, a cold draft brushed her neck like breath. She turned. No one there. Yet the whisper returned. "Get out! He is starving." The voice was feminine, distant yet desperate. She backed away, heartbeat quickening. Elsewhere, Eli set up a camera in one of the drawing rooms. He panned the lens slowly across the dusty furniture, the old piano, the shattered mirror in the corner. The mirror caught his attention. It wasn't broken before. He approached it, staring into the cracked surface. His reflection stared back, but it didn't move in sync. It smiled before he did. Eli stumbled back, the air suddenly heavy. His ears rang faintly, like distant bells underwater. Then faintly, a shadow darted behind him in the reflection. He spun. Nothing. The mirror showed otherwise. A tall, thin shadow, arms too long, standing just a few paces behind him. But in reality, nothing. He grabbed his camera and bolted from the room. Tess found the library, a vast expanse of rotting tomes and brittle parchment. She traced her finger along spines marked with Latin, Greek, and something older. One book sat on a pedestal, The Blood of Memory. She flipped it open, pages crackling, like dry skin. The illustrations were grotesque, rituals involving the draining of blood, the consumption of flesh, symbols etched into bone. A phrase in bold caught her eye. "The blooded ones shall never die, for they drink not life, but remembrance. Their hunger is of the soul, not the body." She swallowed hard. A sound behind her. Footsteps. She turned, expecting Marla or Jenna. Instead, a woman in a tattered black veil stood there, the same as the Silent Bride painting. The woman's mouth was stitched shut, but her eyes screamed. Tess froze, voice caught in her throat. The woman raised a trembling hand and pointed to the floor. Tess looked down. The rug was darkened in a large circle. She peeled it back, revealing an iron trapdoor. Etched in its surface was the same crest from the letter, the twin ravens and the blood-red cross. The woman mouthed words Tess couldn't hear, then snapped out of existence like a flame blown out. Tess stumbled back, hyperventilating. She snapped a photo of the trapdoor and fled the library. The woman's desperate eyes burned into her mind. The team reconvened. Marla, Eli, Tess, Jenna. They all looked pale, shaken. Marla shared her experience of the whispers. Eli mentioned the reflection that smiled first. Tess showed them the trapdoor photo. "We need to leave," Jenna whispered. Victor appeared in the doorway, hands clasped behind his back. "Leaving already? But the night is young, and it is at night, when the house truly awakens." They all turned to him, dread pressing on their chests. Victor's smile widened, his teeth, longer now, sharper. "The crypt awaits," he said softly. "You've come to document history. Now you'll become it." Victor stood in the doorway, shadows stretching impossibly long behind him, as if someone else, or something, stood just beyond sight. "The crypt awaits," he repeated, voice slick and poisonous. You'll find all the answers beneath our feet. No one spoke. A silent consensus hung between them. If they refused, worse things would follow. Victor turned, gliding down the hall, expecting them to follow. Reluctantly, Marla led the group, Tess clutching her notebook tightly, Eli with the camera in a death grip, Jenna trailing, pale and shaking. Victor guided them to the library. The smell of mildew was heavier here, mixed with something sweet and cloying, rotted flowers or blood gone stale. At the center of the room, Victor swept aside the heavy rug, revealing the iron trapdoor Tess had uncovered. The crest glimmered faintly under the candlelight. Victor knelt and with a smooth motion pricked his finger on a small, hidden spike embedded in the door's edge. His blood dripped onto the crest. The iron groaned, ancient mechanisms unlocking with a hiss of air like the exhale of a sleeping giant. With a heavy creak, the door opened, revealing a stone staircase spiraling into darkness. No lights, Victor said when Eli reached for his flashlight. The crypt prefers candlelight. It remembers fire. Victor handed them long, slender candles. The flames barely illuminated a few steps ahead. Down we go, Victor whispered. They descended, the steps narrow and uneven, the air growing colder, wetter. The walls seeped moisture, and the whispers began. Soft, incoherent voices like 100 people mumbling just beyond hearing. Jenna shivered violently. They're speaking, she whispered. But it's wrong. What do you mean wrong? Marla asked. They're saying our names, but backwards. Marla listened carefully. Sure enough, beneath the whispers, her name stretched and twisted, malformed as if spoken by a mouth that didn't fully understand human sound. Al-Rum. Al-Rum. They reached the crypt floor, a vast circular chamber with stone pillars carved into grotesque figures, twisted angels, winged things with eyeless faces. At the center stood an enormous sarcophagus of black marble, chained with rusted iron. Symbols covered its surface, crude and chaotic, some freshly painted in what looked disturbingly like blood. Victor gestured grandly. Welcome to the true heart of Hawthorne Manor, my family's legacy. What is this? Tess whispered, filming every detail. Victor smiled. A vault, a prison, a banquet hall. They noticed now that the walls were lined with bones, skulls embedded in the stone, their hollow eyes watching. Some looked ancient, others fresher. Jenna began crying softly, trembling. We need to go. We need to leave. Leave? Victor's voice cracked the air. Oh no, you were invited, my dear, to witness, to join. Marla faced him, candlelight dancing on her furious expression. Join what, Victor? What are you really? Victor sighed, as though disappointed in their dullness. I am the last of my bloodline. The Hawthorns drank memory, fed on the soul's residue left in the dead's blood. Over centuries our hunger changed us. We stopped needing blood itself. Now we need presence, identity, life remembered. He stepped closer, teeth lengthening. But I'm weak, and so I invited you. Fresh stories, fresh memories. I feed by remembering you. And then, you're forgotten above. Victor raised his hand, and the sarcophagus trembled. The chains rattled, the lid shifting. From inside, something groaned. A voice, not human, bellowed. Open me, Victor! The crew backed away in horror. Eli raised his camera, shaking. What's inside that? Eli asked. Victor chuckled. My father, or what's left of him. The lid began sliding open, stone grinding on stone. A hand, gray, bloated, tipped with black claws, reached out, grasping the edge. The air turned to ice. The whispers became screams. Marla grabbed Jenna, yelling, "We're leaving! Now!" They bolted for the stairs. Victor didn't chase. He watched, smiling. The last thing they heard before fleeing up the steps was Victor's voice, low and giddy. "Run fast, but not too fast. The house loves a slow hunt." They burst back into the library, slamming the trapdoor shut. Marla dropped the heavy rug over it, though it seemed like a laughable barrier. Jenna was sobbing. Tess was pale as chalk, and Eli couldn't steady his camera. "We're leaving. Now," Marla ordered. They rushed to the front door, but it wouldn't open. The lock turned. The handle moved. But the door refused to budge, as if welded shut by an invisible force. Windows, just as sealed. Boards and iron that weren't there before now barred every pane. "We're trapped," Jenna cried. Victor's voice echoed through the halls, though his body was nowhere to be seen. "You crossed the threshold willingly. The house has you now. And Father is awake. He remembers you." The lights flickered violently, shadows growing teeth and eyes in the corners. A deep vibration shook the floors. The manor itself was breathing. Then, the first scream. It wasn't one of them. It came from the hall, a high, choked shriek of something dragged across the wood. Marla turned to her crew, her voice grim. "We find weapons. We stay together. And we find another. Way out," Jenna whispered. "We're not getting out." Marla grabbed her by the shoulders. "We are. I'm not becoming memory food for a vampire and his monster dad." Behind them, the sound of something massive, something wet and heavy, crawling up from the crypt. The hunt had begun. The manor had awakened. Every creak, every groan of... The old wood was no longer just a sound. It was breath. A pulse. The crew huddled in the foyer, their faces pale, sweat slick on their foreheads despite the frigid air. Somewhere beneath their feet, they could still hear the sound of the sarcophagus lid fully opening, the deep grinding of stone and iron, followed by a howl that wasn't human. "We can't just wait here," Marla said, her voice trembling, but determined. "We move. We find another exit." Tess swallowed hard, clutching her notebook like a shield. "This house, it's changing. It's not the same place anymore." She was right. The walls looked closer, darker. The portraits seemed to have shifted, the eyes more focused, the mouths subtly smiling. Victor's voice echoed through the corridors, though no source could be seen. "You carry such vivid stories inside you. I can't wait to taste them." Jenna shook her head, crying. "He's not just going to kill us. He's going to erase us. No one will remember we ever existed." Eli readied his camera, but his hands shook too violently to steady it. "We need to break a window. Break anything. If this place is alive, we bleed it." Marla nodded. "Kitchen. We'll find knives, something sharp." They moved quickly, footsteps muffled by the heavy carpet, shadows twitching at the edge of their vision. The kitchen was massive and antique, yet oddly pristine. Copper pots hung above, knives aligned on a magnetic strip. But the moment they entered, the door slammed shut behind them. The sound of locks twisting by themselves. They froze as the air temperature plummeted. From the pantry door, a soft knocking began. Knock, knock, knock. Jenna whimpered. "Don't open it. Don't open it." But the door creaked open on its own. Something stood inside the dark pantry, shrouded in shadow. Then slowly, It stepped forward, revealing a woman in a black veil. Tess gasped. It was the same woman from the library. The silent bride. The woman raised her stitched mouth, her eyes desperate, and lifted a trembling finger. She pointed not at them, but at the far wall where a dumbwaiter sat unused. She mouthed words they couldn't hear, but her message was clear. Escape. There. Then she was jerked back into the dark pantry by invisible hands, her form disappearing, her screams muffled by stitches that refused to break. Jenna sobbed. "We're gonna die here, Marla." Marla moved fast, grabbing a butcher knife from the wall. "We're getting out. Tess, Eli, help me with that dumbwaiter." It was small, barely enough space for one person at a time, but the shaft went down somewhere, and maybe up. Suddenly, the walls of the kitchen groaned, and a deep, guttural breathing filled the space, like lungs the size of the room exhaling around them. Then, the sound of something crawling down the hall, its limbs scraping the wood, heavy and wet. Marla shoved Eli toward the dumbwaiter. "Go! Now!" He hesitated, but the sound grew louder. Something huge, breathing loudly, mumbling incoherently in an ancient tongue. Eli climbed into the dumbwaiter, barely squeezing in. Marla pulled the rope with all her strength, lowering him into the darkness. Below. Then Jenna screamed. Something stood in the doorway now. Victor's father. His body was half-rotted, skin gray and stretched tight. His eyes were milky, his jaw unhinged like a snake's. Fingers like claws dragged along the floor, tearing grooves into the wood. He smiled, lips cracking open, revealing a mouth filled with needle-sharp teeth. "You will be remembered. In my marrow," he hissed. Marla threw the knife. It embedded in his shoulder. The thing didn't flinch. Tess grabbed a cast-iron pan, swinging it with all her might. The blow connected with a sickening crack, and the thing staggered back, laughing dryly. "Run!" Marla shouted. Tess and Jenna fled through the side door, Marla following close, behind. Eli descended through the dumbwaiter shaft, landing roughly in a cold, dark basement. The floor was stone, slick with moisture, and something else. Something sticky. His flashlight barely worked, flickering, but it illuminated walls, lined with corpses, some fresh, some ancient, all hanging like meat in a freezer. They stared with hollow eyes, mouths open in frozen screams. And above, something moved. Eli stumbled back, hearing a whisper directly in his ear. "You're already dead, Eli." He spun the flashlight around. Nothing. But a hand shot from the dark, grabbing his ankle. A corpse that wasn't dead tried pulling him into the pile. Eli screamed, kicking wildly, flashlight dropping and flickering out. In the blackness, the whisper continued. "You will feed the house. You will feed the house. You will..." The flashlight snapped back on. The corpse was gone. But Eli knew he wasn't alone. Marla, Tess, and Jenna sprinted into the main hall, but the layout of the house was wrong. Hallways that weren't there before. Doors leading to walls. Stairs that vanished halfway up. The house was shifting. Tess suddenly stopped. "The library. We should head back to the trapdoor. We can burn it shut. Stop whatever's following us." Marla grabbed her arm. "We find Eli first." "Then we're dead," Tess snapped. Before they could argue, Victor's voice echoed again, smooth and patient. "You taste so sweet when afraid." A shadow moved along the walls. Victor, or the thing that was once Victor, his body stretched, longer, less human. "You can't escape," he said. "You'll live here forever, not as yourselves, but as memories in my belly." He lunged, Marla shoved Tess and Jenna aside, raising another kitchen knife she'd grabbed. She swung, slashing Victor's cheek. Instead of blood, black smoke hissed out. Victor chuckled, unfazed. "Delicious!" Marla yelled, "Go! Find Eli!" Jenna and Tess ran, disappearing into the maze of halls, while Marla stood her ground. But Victor was too fast. His hand wrapped around her neck, cold and iron strong. "I want your first memory," he whispered. "The first thing you loved. The first thing you feared." Marla choked, struggling, the world dimming, until a shadow crossed behind Victor. It was the silent bride. She placed a hand on Victor's back, and for the first time, Victor recoiled, hissing like he'd been burned. Marla gasped for air, collapsing, as the bride whispered something inaudible. Victor fled into the dark, his form rippling like smoke. Marla looked up at the bride, who reached out a hand. Her stitched mouth tried to form words. Only one was clear. "Run." The house was wrong. The walls didn't just creak, they shifted. Marla knew this as soon as she stumbled down the hallway, every turn leading her somewhere unfamiliar. The banisters curved where there should have been corners. Doors materialized where blank walls once stood. Somewhere deep in the house, she could still hear Victor laughing. Deep, rumbling, as if the walls themselves were chuckling. Her throat burned from where he'd gripped her, but she pressed on. She had to find the others. Then she heard it, Eli's voice, faint. "Marla, help." She followed, heart pounding, candlelight barely keeping the dark at bay. The voice led her to a heavy oak door. She pushed it open. The room was a mirror of the library, but all the books were blank. Empty spines, pages white and fluttering, in a wind that shouldn't exist indoors. "Eli?" No answer. Then the door slammed behind her. The air grew still. She turned. Standing by the fireplace was Victor. But not just him, dozens of him. All standing, motionless, eyes closed. Some were dressed differently, some old, some modern. Then one of them opened his eyes. "You're in the memory room," Victor said. "Every version of me that's fed stands here." Marla backed up, but every movement was met by a whisper of footsteps. Some of the other Victors opening their eyes, grinning. "The house remembers everyone it eats. I remember everyone I've digested. You'll be another statue in here soon, Marla." She raised her knife. "Come and try." Victor laughed softly. "Bravery. It'll make your memories richer." Suddenly, the Victors charged, their feet silent on the wood, hands reaching. Marla bolted, ducking beneath their grasp, sprinting for the door. She yanked it open. But it wasn't the hallway. It was the basement. Marla stumbled forward, the smell of damp and death overwhelming. The corpses hanging on the walls had moved. Some swayed. Some turned their heads to watch her. Then a flashlight beam hit her. "Marla," Eli's voice. She spun. Eli stood, bruised and filthy, flashlight trembling in his hand. "Jesus, I thought I was dead," he muttered. "Where are the others?" Marla asked. Eli shook his head. "I don't know. I heard someone whisper my name, and then I was down here. But there's a door that wasn't here before." He pointed. The far side of the basement, where an iron door stood, slightly ajar, a faint red light flickering beyond. "We have to try," Marla said. Together they crossed the cold stone floor, the hanging bodies brushing against them like heavy curtains. One corpse whispered in Marla's ear, "He'll wear your face next." She shivered but pressed on. They reached the door and pushed through, and found themselves in the grand dining room. But it was wrong. The table was set, but everyone seated was dead. Decayed corpses in Victorian garb, slumped in chairs, jaws hanging open. Some still held goblets filled with black liquid. At the head of the table sat Victor's father, the bloated gray figure they'd seen in the crypt, now fully awake, his eyes glistening. "You've joined the banquet," he rasped. "Eat, or be eaten." The corpses began to stir, bones creaking, heads lifting. Eli screamed, grabbing Marla. "Go, move." They turned to run, but the door was gone. Only a wall stood where they entered. The corpses began rising from their seats, silverware still clenched in skeletal hands, eyes empty but ravenous. Then the silent bride appeared again. She stood beside the father, veiled and silent, but she raised one hand and pointed toward the fireplace. A gap, barely noticeable, was in the stonework. Marla yanked Eli toward it. They squeezed through, just as the corpses lunged, rotting hands clawing the air. The gap led to a crawl space, cold and tight, forcing them to belly crawl. Every scrape of stone against their bodies felt like the house was trying to chew them. Behind them, they heard the father's voice. "You'll never leave, not whole." Elsewhere, Jenna and Tess stumbled through twisting hallways, breathless, exhausted. Tess stopped suddenly. "Listen," she whispered. A piano playing, soft, mournful. "That's the parlor," Jenna said. But when they found the source, it wasn't a piano. It was Victor, seated at an organ made of bones, playing a hollow tune that sounded like a funeral dirge. When he saw them, he smiled. "Ah, the flavors I haven't tasted yet." Tess screamed and hurled a candlestick at him. It passed through him like smoke. Jenna grabbed Tess's hand. "Run!" They ran, doors slamming shut behind them, corridors tightening. At one turn, a window appeared, unbarred. Jenna rushed to it, trying to pry it open. "We can break it." Tess grabbed a nearby stool, swinging hard, but the glass didn't shatter. It bent inward like skin, rippling. Suddenly, a face pushed through the glass from outside. A corpse, its eyes gouged, mouth sewn shut, pressed against the other side of the window skin, moaning. Tess screamed, dropping the stool. They backed away, just as the floor beneath them rippled like water, hands reaching up. "Run!" The house was eating itself, warping and folding like a living organism. Marla and Eli emerged from the crawl space into what looked like a child's bedroom. Dusty toys, a rocking horse, a tiny bed. The wallpaper was peeling, revealing scripture written in blood beneath it. "Where are we?" Eli asked. "I don't think it matters anymore," Marla whispered. "This place, it's not a house, it's a throat." She knelt by the bed, finding a child's diary, pages stuck together with grime. She peeled it open. "He comes at night. He drinks their names. Mother says don't make a sound, or he'll eat your face." Then a music box began playing on its own. The tune was soft, delicate, until it slowed down, distorting, deeper and deeper, like something was crawling through the melody. The bed shifted, something underneath. Eli raised his flashlight, and a child's hand reached out. Not rotted, not dead. A child. "Help," the little boy whispered. Marla's voice cracked. "Who are you?" The boy stared up, eyes wide, trembling. "I'm what's left. Don't let him remember me, please." Suddenly, the door burst open. Victor's father stood there, filling the frame, grin wide and obscene. "You can't hide them, child," he rasped. "You're all mine." Marla grabbed the child's hand, yanking him free. She and Eli bolted, the father's heavy steps shaking the house. Somewhere Jenna and Tess screamed. They were all being hunted now. The house was closing in, and soon. It would remember them all. Marla's lungs burned. Eli's flashlight swung wildly in his grip, and the child, pale, trembling, stumbled between them, struggling to keep up. Behind them, the sound of Victor's father thudding through the halls shook the floorboards, like bones snapping underfoot. His guttural growl followed them. "You can run, but you will feed me eventually." They burst through a warped doorway and collapsed into a parlor, one that shouldn't exist where they'd landed. Dusty chairs circled a dead fireplace, and sitting in one of them, head in her hands, was Tess. "Marla!" Tess looked up, eyes wide. "Jenna, she's gone. The house took her." Marla fell to her knees, still clutching the child. "We need to get out. I don't care how. We burn the place down if we have to." Eli slammed the door shut behind them, pressing his weight against it, though he knew it would barely hold. Tess pointed to the boy. "Who's that?" Marla shook her head. "I don't know. He was hiding in that nightmare bedroom." The boy looked up at them, eyes sunken and glassy. "I don't remember my name." That was wrong. Everyone remembered their name, especially a child. "Why don't you remember?" Marla asked gently. "Because the house ate it," he whispered. "It eats who you are. If you forget, it can keep you." Eli wiped sweat from his brow. "You're saying if we forget our names, we're stuck here?" The boy nodded. "You'll become a shadow, a statue, like them." Tess's voice cracked. "Then how are you still here?" The boy shook his head slowly. "Because she won't let me be eaten." Who? But they already knew. The silent bride. A cold breeze blew through the room. The shadows shifted, and there she stood, silent as ever, her veil black, as night, hands clasped. The boy ran to her, wrapping his arms around her waist. The bride laid a hand on his head, tenderly. She looked at Marla and mouthed 2 words. "Burn it." Elsewhere, Jenna stumbled through the endless corridors. Her legs ached, her mind foggy. She was losing something. Her name. She tried to say it aloud, but it came out a whisper, broken. "I'm G." She reached a grand ballroom, chandeliers hanging low, caked in dust. Music played faintly, a waltz on a broken phonograph. Then she saw them. A crowd of people dancing, their faces blank, flesh stretched tight over bone. Their movements graceful but wrong. Too fluid, too fast, like marionettes on tangled strings. Jenna backed away. Victor appeared, smiling. "You'll dance forever, Jenna. Isn't that a fine legacy? A perfect memory." She screamed, but Victor's hand closed around her mouth. Her screams became nothing. Her name slipped from her mind like a dream fading at dawn. Marla stood. "We burn it. The bride showed me in the crypt. The place runs on memory. But the bodies, the walls, they're soaked in oil, in fat, in blood. Fire can kill it." Tess stared. "But we're trapped. No way out once it burns." Marla looked at the silent bride. "Is there a way?" The bride raised her hand and pointed to the boy. "He's the key," Marla muttered. "We help him remember his name. He'll show us the way out." The boy shook his head violently. "I don't remember!" Tess knelt in front of him. "What's the first thing you remember?" He closed his eyes. A piano, a song, and a woman singing. She smelled like flowers, lilies. Marla's eyes widened. She remembered the music box, the song it played. "The music box," she whispered. "That's the key." They had to go back to the bedroom. Back where Victor's father roamed, Eli cursed under his breath. "We're gonna die in here." "No," Marla said. "We're gonna end it." They moved fast, the bride guiding them, her presence warding off the worst of the house's tricks. But the walls still whispered, trying to steal their names in murmured chants. At last, they reached the child's room. The music box sat on the dusty dresser, lid closed. Marla lifted it. "This song, what is it?" The boy trembled. "Mama used to sing it, but I don't remember the words." Then, footsteps. Heavy, wet. Victor's father stood in the doorway, hunched and grinning. "I remember your names now," he rasped. "Let me eat them." Marla snapped the music box open. The song played, sweet, soft, sad. The boy clutched his head, eyes shut tight. Then he gasped, "Caleb, my name is Caleb." The air shivered. The father stepped back, eyes wide. "No." The silent bride stepped forward, raising her hand. And for the first time she spoke, though her mouth was still stitched. "His name is remembered." The father screamed, his body splitting, cracking, leaking black fluid. The house shuddered. Caleb ran to the bride, who lifted him into her arms. Marla stared at the floor, the cracks widening, the walls bleeding. "Shadow, now," the bride whispered. "Now you burn it." Eli grabbed a nearby oil lamp, smashing it on the bed. The flames spread fast, the walls catching instantly as if soaked. They fled the room as the house screamed. Not wood breaking, but voices, thousands, all crying out in agony. The bride led them down hallways that melted, doors that opened to collapsing tunnels of smoke and ash. At last, they reached the front door. It was open. Beyond it, night, cold and clear. "Go," the bride whispered. Marla grabbed Caleb's hand, Tess and Eli beside her. They ran, bursting into the night air, coughing smoke. Behind them, the manor roared, the entire structure burning, twisting, collapsing in on itself. Victor's screams, his father's howls, the cries of the countless dead, all burned away in the blaze. When it was over, just ashes and silence. They stood on the hill, watching the smoke drift into the morning sky. Caleb stood silently, holding the bride's hand. Marla approached her. "Who are you, really?" the bride whispered. The first memory he tried to eat, but I held on, and now I can rest. She kissed Caleb's forehead, and with that, the bride faded into the morning light. Caleb turned to Marla. "I remember who I am now, thank you." Marla smiled faintly. "You saved us." They walked down the hill, the sun rising, the house gone. But not the memories. They would remember. And because they remembered, they lived. Dawn burned pale over Amityville, the sky bleeding streaks of gold and gray. Marla stood with Eli, Tess, and Caleb, staring at the smoking crater where Hawthorne Manor once stood. No police sirens, no curious townsfolk. Nothing. It was as if the house had been forgotten by the world the moment it burned, like it had never been there at all. Marla turned to Caleb, the boy's hand still in hers. "Do you remember everything now?" Caleb nodded, but his eyes held an exhaustion too deep for a child. "Most of it. My mother was the silent bride. Victor took her name, tried to take mine, but she kept me hidden." Tess crouched to his level. "What happens to you now?" Caleb looked up at the horizon. "I don't know. But I'm real again. I think." I can live now. For the first time, Marla allowed herself to feel it. Relief. They had survived. They had names. And yet, something wasn't right. "Where's Jenna?" Eli asked, quietly. No one answered. They had heard her scream once, but after that, nothing, and no body. Marla's heart sank. The house hadn't just eaten bodies, it had erased. She tried to say Jenna's last name, but it was gone, swallowed. "We won't forget," Marla said aloud, fists clenched. "We won't forget any of them." Caleb's voice was soft. "You have to remember. Because if you don't, it comes back." They didn't ask what he meant. They already knew. Back in the city, life pressed on. Marla sat in the editing room with Eli, reviewing the footage they'd shot. Hours of darkness, flickering lights, screams. But every time they found a clip of Jenna, the screen glitched. Her face blurred, voice warped. "It's like she's being wiped out," Eli muttered. Marla shook her head. "We keep the footage. We keep her name alive. That's how we beat it." Yet when Marla went to write Jenna's full name on the project board, her hand froze. She couldn't remember it. What the hell was her last name? Eli tried to recall. "It's G something?" They both stared, realizing the house still held part of them. Tess couldn't sleep. The dreams were worse. She wandered her tiny apartment at night, shadows stretching in the corners. Sometimes she'd hear piano music, faintly. Sometimes, footsteps. That night, while brushing her teeth, she looked in the mirror, and for a moment her reflection didn't mimic her. It smiled first. Her heart froze. When she blinked, it was gone. But deep in her mind, a whisper. "You taste sweeter when you forget." Marla couldn't stop thinking about the bride, the silent bride. She researched local history, trying to find records of her. Nothing. No marriage records, no deaths, no mention of a veiled woman in Amityville's past. It was like she never existed, except for one photograph, one that Marla found in an archived newspaper, yellowed and brittle. In the corner of a black and white photo of Hawthorne Manor's facade, a figure stood in the upper window, a woman in a veil. Her hand pressed to the glass. Marla traced the image with her fingertip. "I'll remember you," she whispered. "I promise." Somewhere beneath the earth, in a place where no time exists, bones shift. A voice echoes, familiar and cold. "One memory survived. That's all I need." The voice chuckles. A single dead eye opens in the dark. And Victor Hawthorne smiles. "I'll remember the rest soon." Story 5. The sky looked like it had been bruised. Clouds hung low, thick and gray, as if something terrible had happened, and the world still hadn't recovered. Victor Kane drove past crumbling buildings and empty streets. The city was dying, if it wasn't already dead. He lit a cigarette with shaking hands and checked the paper scrap in his jacket pocket again. There were only 3 words on it. Blackwell Hotel, room 214. He had found it slipped under his door 2 nights ago. No return address. No name. But he knew it had to do with Lila, his sister. She had gone missing a year ago, and every lead had turned cold until now. Victor parked in front of a tall, rotting building. The sign above the rusted doors barely hung on. Blackwell Hotel. There was no light in the windows, no sign of life, but something inside pulled at him, like invisible hands on his shoulders. He stepped inside. The moment he crossed the threshold, The air changed. It felt thick, like walking underwater. The lobby was dim and smelled like damp wood and iron. A flickering chandelier swayed overhead, though there was no wind. Behind the front desk sat an old woman in black lace. Her skin looked like melted wax, and her eyes were pale, almost white. She smiled without lips. "Welcome, Mr. Kane," she said before he could speak. "We've been expecting you." Victor froze. "How do you know my name?" "Room 214 is ready." She slid a rusted key across the counter. Her long, yellow fingernails scratched the wood. Victor picked it up without meaning to. Something in his hand pulsed when he touched the key. "What is this place?" he asked. The woman smiled wider. "A place where the lost are found." Victor turned to look around. A tall man in a dusty coat stood motionless in the corner. A little girl with empty eyes rocked in a broken chair. None of them moved. None blinked. Victor climbed the stairs. The hallway stretched far longer than it should. No matter how far he walked, the door numbers stayed the same. 213, 213, 213, then suddenly, 214. He put the key in. The door groaned open. The room was cold. A bare bulb hung from the ceiling, flickering weakly. A cracked mirror faced the bed. Victor walked in and sat down. The mattress creaked beneath him like it was sighing. There was something under the bed. He knelt down, slowly. A small, black notebook. Lila's name was on the front. His heart thudded in his chest. He opened the book, but the pages were blank. Then, as if written by invisible ink, words appeared. "Help me, Vic. He's in the walls." He dropped the notebook and stumbled back. The mirror suddenly cracked from corner to corner. From inside the wall, behind the bed, came a soft tapping. Tap, tap, tap. Victor backed into the hallway and ran straight into a woman. Victor stumbled backward, heart racing. The woman he'd bumped into stared at him with wide, dark eyes. She was pale, with long black hair covering half her face. She didn't speak. Then he realized she couldn't speak. Her lips were stitched shut. Fine. Black threads crisscrossed. Her mouth like a cruel joke. She grabbed his wrist and shook her head, as if warning him. Her fingers were ice cold. "Who are you?" Victor whispered. "What the hell is this place?" She pointed at the walls. Then she traced a crown in the air with her finger. A crown. The king, Victor guessed. The Hollow King? She nodded quickly, terrified. Suddenly the sound returned, a tapping inside the walls. Except now it was heavier. Like footsteps, but wrong. The walls groaned, like something massive was moving inside them. Victor looked at the stitched woman. "Can you show me what's going on?" She nodded again and gestured for him to follow. They crept down the endless hallways. The walls seemed to breathe, rising and falling with each step they took. The air got colder. Victor could see his breath. They stopped in front of a wall with old, peeling wallpaper. She knocked 3 times, a hollow sound. She pressed her hand to it, and the wall shifted, like skin under pressure. A secret door swung open with a soft wheeze. Inside was a cramped tunnel, lit by dying candles. Strange symbols lined the walls, circles, eyes, and crooked crowns. They walked deeper until they reached a hidden chamber. At the center stood a hunched man in a filthy lab coat, scribbling in a notebook. He turned. His face was sharp and sickly pale, his eyes sunk deep. "Victor Kane," the man said. "I knew you'd come. Who are you?" Dr. Felix Morrow, he replied, grinning. And you're walking straight into the Hollow King's mouth. Victor didn't respond. The mute woman stood close behind him, watching the walls. Felix chuckled. You've heard them, haven't you? The whispers, the tapping. The walls are alive here, my friend. Alive and hungry. Victor clenched his fists. My sister. Lila, is she here? Felix shrugged. Everyone's here. If they came to the Blackwell, they never really leave. Victor grabbed him by the coat. Tell me where she is. Felix laughed, unbothered. You'll never find her by force. The king decides. Victor's hands shook. What is the Hollow? King? Felix's face darkened. He is the thing beneath the walls, the one who feeds on us. You think this hotel is a building? It's a body. His body. We are his food. Victor stepped back, stomach turning. Felix continued. He lets us stay alive just enough to suffer. We are prisoners in his belly. The mute woman tapped Victor's arm and pointed at a door in the corner. Felix shook his head. Don't. If you go in there, you'll see what's left of those who disobeyed. Victor looked at her. She nodded firmly. He made his choice and opened the door. It was pitch dark inside. Then, dozens of eyes opened in the shadows. Not human eyes. Yellow, slit-pupiled, moving in every direction. A voice crawled into Victor's head. It wasn't spoken aloud. It was inside his mind. Victor Kane, the brother, the seeker. You will feed me too. Victor stumbled back, clutching his skull. The voice was ice and knives. The walls rippled, shapes forming. Half-human creatures fused into the plaster. Mouths moved, but only the voice spoke. Your sister begged to live. I am still deciding. Victor screamed. Where is she? Show me. The voice chuckled like breaking glass. Find my heart, then we'll talk. The eyes vanished. The room went black. Victor ran out, panting. Felix looked amused. Congratulations, you've been noticed. Victor turned to the mute woman. I need your help. She picked up a piece of chalk from the floor and wrote on the wall, Evelyn. Her name. Victor and Evelyn sat in the chamber while Felix scribbled in his journal. Victor asked, What happened to your mouth? She looked away, ashamed. Felix answered, For her. She was a maid here, got caught snooping. The king's servant stitched her mouth shut so she couldn't scream. Victor felt sick. Evelyn wrote on the wall again. I can hear them. The walls. The king. Victor stared. You're psychic. She nodded, then drew a symbol. A crooked crown with an eye inside it. Victor knew then. She was his only chance. Felix explained, There's a way. The king has a heart, hidden deep inside this place. If you destroy it, maybe, just maybe, you can free your sister. But no one's ever returned, he added with a grin. Victor stood. I don't care. I'll go. Evelyn stood too. She handed Victor a small, old-fashioned lantern. The flame inside was blue. What's this? Victor asked. Light that shows the truth, Felix said. You'll need it. Victor grabbed the lantern, ready. Suddenly the walls screamed, a sound like hundreds of mouths wailing in pain. The lights flickered. Felix's face went pale. He knows. He's coming. Victor turned to Evelyn. Show me the way. She nodded. Together, they ran. Deeper into the hotel, the lantern's blue flame leading the path. Behind them, the walls pulsed. And something massive and hollow crawled just beneath the surface. Victor held the blue lantern tightly as he and Evelyn hurried through the narrow halls. The walls moaned like they were in pain. shifting slightly underfoot, making the entire place feel alive and angry. "What is this place really?" Victor whispered, his breath cold in the air. Evelyn stopped, knelt down, and with a piece of broken chalk, she scrawled one word on the floor. "Stomach." Victor's stomach churned. "We're inside the Hollow King. The hotel. It's his body." She nodded. Somewhere deep inside, the walls made a wet, slithering sound. Suddenly, a shrill scream echoed from above. A woman's voice pleading. Victor's heart jumped. "Lila?" Without thinking, he ran. Victor burst into a grand hall where chandeliers hung like the bones of giants. In the center, a woman was suspended by her arms, strung up by fleshy ropes growing from the ceiling. Her face was sunken, her eyes wild. "Help me!" she cried. Victor approached, but Evelyn grabbed his arm and shook her head violently. "What? We can't leave her," Victor argued. Then he saw it, the woman's shadow. It didn't match her movements. It writhed and twisted, reaching toward him. Victor backed away. The woman's voice shifted, deeper, cruel. "Stay." "Feed me," she hissed. Her mouth stretched impossibly wide, revealing rows of black teeth. Victor stepped back just as her shadow detached from her body, leaping forward like a living creature. Evelyn raised her hand, her eyes glowing faintly. The blue flame of the lantern flared, and the shadow screamed, burning away into nothing. The woman slumped dead. Victor gasped, heart pounding. "What the hell was that?" Evelyn wrote, "Shadows feed, don't trust them." They pushed forward, reaching an old reception room. On the desk was a massive leather-bound guest book, pages yellow and crumbling. Victor flipped through it. Each name written carefully, and next to each, a symbol. Some names had eyes drawn beside them. Others had tiny crowns. Then he saw it, Lila Kane, room 333. Victor traced his finger over her name. The symbol next to it was a black crown. "She's here," he whispered. Evelyn pointed down a dark hallway, but her hand shook. Victor noticed. "What is it?" She picked up the chalk and wrote, "Room 333 is where the king's servants wait." Victor's mouth went dry. "Then that's where we're going." As they walked, the walls seemed tighter. The wallpaper throbbed like skin. The floorboards pulsed beneath their feet like a heartbeat. Suddenly, a door ahead burst open, and two figures in black cloaks stepped out. They had no faces, just smooth, pale flesh where eyes and mouths should be. Evelyn froze. She mouthed one word, "Servants." The faceless creatures moved like dancers, their movements graceful but wrong, bending at impossible angles. Victor raised the lantern. The blue light made them hiss, backing away. One of them finally spoke. A raspy, wet voice. "Turn back. The king is hungry tonight." Victor stood his ground. "I want my sister." The servant chuckled. "Then you will join her. Everyone feeds him." The two creatures charged. Victor swung the lantern, its flame flaring, burning the nearest servant's cloak. Beneath it, the body was nothing but veins and stretched muscle. Evelyn screamed silently, her eyes glowing brighter. Shadows peeled off the walls and slammed into the second servant, tearing it apart. The hallway was filled with the smell of burning flesh. Victor coughed. "We don't have much time." Evelyn nodded, and they kept moving. They reached a wide room filled with mirrors of all shapes and sizes, but none of them showed reflections. Instead, each mirror showed a different person trapped inside, banging on the glass, screaming with no sound. Victor moved closer. One mirror showed Lila, her hands bloody, her mouth open in a silent scream. Victor punched the glass. "Lila, I'm here!" But his fist didn't even scratch it. Behind him, Evelyn wrote, "Not real. Projections. Traps." Victor clenched his fists. "Then where is she really?" Evelyn pointed to the far end, where a spiral staircase descended underground. Victor glanced back at Lila's image. She looked at him through the mirror, and suddenly smiled. But it wasn't his sister's smile. He shuddered and followed Evelyn. The spiral staircase was endless, spiraling deeper until the walls turned from wood to wet, pulsing flesh. It was like walking inside a throat. They stepped into a chamber that smelled of rot and iron. In the center, a massive door of bone stood shut, marked with the crooked crown. Victor touched it, and a sound like a deep, monstrous heartbeat echoed from the other side. Suddenly, Felix Morrow appeared from the shadows, his smile twisted. "Told you you'd find the heart," Felix said, "but I didn't say you'd survive." Victor raised the lantern. "Get out of the way." But Felix shook his head. "The Hollow King promised me freedom, if I deliver you." Felix's skin rippled, and his shadow stretched, growing claws. Victor stood his ground. "You won't stop me!" Felix laughed, his voice layered with another, deeper and more guttural. Then he lunged. Felix's body changed as he attacked. His jaw unhinged, rows of jagged teeth stretching down his throat. Victor swung the lantern, but Felix dodged, his shadow claw slashing Victor's side. He cried out, stumbling. Evelyn raised her hands, her power surging. Shadows from the walls formed sharp tendrils, stabbing at Felix. But Felix was fast. He knocked Evelyn down, her head hitting the floor. Victor crawled to the lantern, blood pouring. From his side, Felix loomed over him, eyes glowing red. "Your heart, or hers. Which will the king feast on first?" Felix sneered. Victor grabbed the lantern, its flame now dim. "Neither." He smashed it into Felix's face. The blue flame erupted, covering Felix's head in ghostly fire. He screamed, a sound that wasn't fully human. The shadows peeled away from him, and his body collapsed, smoking and dead. Victor collapsed too, panting. Evelyn stirred, sitting up, dazed but alive. Victor looked at the bone door. "We have to open it." Evelyn helped him stand. She touched the door, and it slowly cracked open with a deep, wet sound. Inside was a massive cavern, walls of pulsating flesh and bone. In the center hung a giant beating heart, black and veined, the size of a car. Every beat shook the ground. Around it, dozens of bodies hung from the ceiling, wrapped in strings of flesh, some still twitching. Victor staggered forward. He could hear Lila's voice inside his head. "Please, help me. I'm cold." Victor turned to Evelyn. "I have to destroy it." She picked up a jagged bone from the ground and handed it to him, like a spear. Victor gripped it tight and stepped forward. But the walls screamed. The heart's surface split, revealing a massive, singular eye. It stared straight at him. A deep voice whispered, "You kill me, and you kill her." Victor froze. "Liar." The eye blinked. "Choose. Save her, or be her killer." Victor's hand shook. He looked back at Evelyn, who simply nodded. Victor roared and drove the bone spear into the heart. The cavern shook violently. The heart convulsed, spraying black ichor everywhere. The bodies overhead screamed, some dying, some freed. Victor fell to his knees, dizzy. Everything went dark. Victor woke up in darkness, his head pounding. Evelyn sat beside him, weak but alive. But Lila, she was not there. Victor whispered, "Did I kill her?" Evelyn shook her head slowly and wrote, "Not dead. Somewhere deeper." Victor stared at the shadows, hearing distant whispers. The hotel wasn't done with him. Yet Victor sat on the cold floor, his body still aching from the battle. The black heart of the Hollow King lay pierced behind him, oozing thick, dark blood. But there was no sign of Lila. He looked at Evelyn. "You said she's not dead." Evelyn nodded weakly, then wrote on the ground, "She's deeper. In the hollow realm." Victor frowned. "What is that?" Evelyn drew a door in the dust. Then beneath it, she drew a dark spiral. He understood. The hollow realm wasn't just under the hotel. It was below everything, another world entirely. "How do we get there?" Evelyn hesitated. Then she wrote, "You must die for a while." Victor's heart sank. "What?" She stared at him, eyes heavy with sadness. "Die to enter. Return before it takes you forever." Victor stood up, trembling. "If that's the only way, then do it." Evelyn picked up a jagged shard of bone. She looked at him for permission. Victor closed his eyes. "Do it." Pain exploded in his chest as Evelyn drove the bone into his side. Not deep enough to kill, but enough to make his heart stop. Victor collapsed, everything going black. And then, his eyes opened. But he wasn't in the hotel anymore. The world around him was a nightmare. The sky was an endless swirl of black clouds and crimson lightning. The ground was cracked stone and bone, and the air smelled like burnt hair and rot. Towering above him was a twisted version of the hotel, black, spiked, pulsing like a living thing. Victor whispered, "The Hollow Realm." He wasn't alone. Figures wandered in the distance, pale, hollow-eyed, mumbling to themselves. "Lila," Victor said, staggering forward. Victor approached a group of them. Their skin was gray, stretched tight over bone. They stared ahead, eyes empty. One of them turned, and Victor's heart stopped. It was his old friend Marcus, who had gone missing years ago. "Marcus?" Victor asked, but Marcus didn't respond, just stared blankly. Another soul whispered, "No names here, just hollow." Suddenly, a deep rumbling shook the ground. The sky flashed red. A booming voice echoed, "You've come, brother." Victor turned, and there stood a massive figure, the Hollow King. The Hollow King was a giant of shadow and bone, with a crooked crown fused into his skull. His face was a mask of empty eye sockets, but somehow Victor felt the thing was staring straight into him. "You stabbed my heart," the Hollow King growled, "but I do not die so easily." Victor stood his ground. "Where is my sister?" The Hollow King chuckled, a sound like bones grinding together. "Why do you seek her? You failed her once already." Victor's hands shook with rage. "Tell me where she is." The king raised a long, bony finger, pointing to the twisted hotel. "She's there, in the tower, but you'll never reach her." "Why?" "Because you'll be hollow before you get there," the king whispered. The Hollow King vanished, dissolving into smoke. Victor took a deep breath, then moved toward the black tower. The path to the tower was a maze of bones and crumbling bridges. Victor heard voices all around him, whispers that sounded like Lila, calling his name. He wanted to run, but the path kept changing. Stairs twisted. Bridges bent upward into the sky. He came across a massive gate made of rib bones. At the center stood Mother Blackwell, the old woman from the hotel desk. She smiled coldly. "I told you to mind the walls, boy," she said. Victor glared. "Move." She shook her head. "No one passes without a toll." "What toll?" She smiled wider, her teeth rotting. "A memory. Give me your most precious memory, or stay here forever." Victor clenched his fists. If he gave her a memory, what would he lose? But he thought of Lila, and he knew what to do. "My mother's face," Victor said. "Take it." Mother Blackwell's eyes glowed, and Victor felt something rip from his mind. Suddenly, he couldn't remember his mother anymore. Her face was gone, a blank space in his memory. But the gate opened. Victor walked through, emptier than before. Finally, Victor reached the Black Tower. It pulsed with every beat, like a living heart. He entered. Inside, the walls were lined with faces, trapped souls, whispering, begging for release. Victor climbed the spiral staircase, each step heavier than the last. His body felt weaker, his mind foggier. At the top, he saw her. Lila. She was chained to the floor, eyes closed, her body pale and cold. "Lila!" Victor shouted. She stirred, weakly lifting her head. "Vic? Is it really you?" Victor ran to her, breaking the chains with a metal rod. But Lila shook her head. "You shouldn't have come. He's coming." The room grew cold. The walls darkened. And then, the Hollow King appeared again, filling the chamber. "You've come far," he growled, "but you're mine now." Victor stood between the king and Lila. "Then take me. Let her go." The king laughed. "Noble, but pointless." But then, Evelyn's voice echoed in Victor's mind. "Don't give in. I'm guiding you." Somehow, even in this realm, she was with him. Victor grabbed a nearby shard of bone. "You'll have to kill me," the Hollow King chuckled. "Gladly." They fought, Victor dodging, slashing. But the king was massive, his claws raking the air. Lila tried to stand, but collapsed. Victor was losing, his strength fading. Then Evelyn's voice whispered, "Use your memory." Victor remembered, or tried to. His mind was foggy, but he focused on Lila's laugh, her smile as a child. The memory burned like fire. The Hollow King screamed, recoiling. "Stop!" Victor realized. Memories hurt the king. He was made of emptiness, and memories were life. Victor shouted every memory he could. Birthdays, laughter, his sisters singing. The Hollow King shrieked, his form collapsing, shadows peeling away. Finally, Victor drove the bone shard into the king's hollow skull. The king screamed one last time and exploded into dust. The tower began to collapse. Victor grabbed Lila. She was weak, but alive. The world cracked, the sky breaking apart. Then, Victor's eyes snapped open. He was back in the hotel's basement, gasping for air. Evelyn knelt beside him, tears in her eyes. Lila lay next to him, breathing softly. They had returned. Victor held his sister close. She was safe, for now. But the hotel walls still whispered. And far away, in the dark, something else watched. Victor Kane opened his eyes slowly. The cold floor of the Blackwell Hotel's basement pressed against his cheek. His body ached like every bone had been broken and put back together wrong. He sat up, breathing heavily. Beside him, Lila stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, glassy and confused. "Vic!" she whispered. Victor smiled weakly. "You're okay." Her lip trembled. "I saw something. I felt dead." "You were close," Victor admitted. "But I found you." Lila looked around, confused. "Where are we?" Victor paused. The walls still whispered. Shadows still shifted. They were back in the hotel, but it wasn't over. Not yet. Evelyn stood nearby, swaying on her feet. She looked drained, like her life was leaking from her. Victor stood up quickly. "Evelyn? Hey, stay with me." She smiled faintly, then tapped her throat. Still no voice. She knelt and wrote, "I guided you. Paid a price." Her hands shook as she wrote more. "Part of me stayed in the hollow realm." Victor felt a deep, cold guilt. She had given something up, a piece of her soul, to help him find Lila. "You didn't have to," Victor whispered. Evelyn just smiled and wrote, "I did." Then the walls trembled. The floor shook. Far away, the sound of bones cracking echoed. The hotel was waking up, angry that its prey had escaped. Victor helped Lila to her feet. "We need to leave. Now." But Evelyn grabbed his arm. She wrote, "The king is not dead, wounded, but alive." Victor clenched his fists. "Then I'll kill him again." Evelyn shook her head. "We can't leave yet." Suddenly, figures emerged from the dark halls. The servants, faceless and tall, dressed in tattered black. Their bodies twitched, as if worms crawled beneath their skin. Victor stepped in front of Lila and Evelyn, ready to fight. The servants whispered in raspy voices like dead leaves brushing together. "No one escapes the Blackwell." Evelyn raised her hands, her shadow magic. Weak, she was too drained. The servants lunged. Victor fought back with his fists and whatever debris he could grab. But there were too many. Just when he thought they'd all be swallowed by shadows, a loud, deep sound echoed through the walls. A horn blast, like from a cathedral bell, shaking the entire hotel. The servants froze, then fled. Victor looked around, confused. "What the hell was that?" Evelyn wrote quickly. "The Hollow King, calling his army." Victor stared at her. "He's rallying." She nodded. The Blackwell Hotel wasn't just alive, it was about to go to war. In the hall ahead, Victor spotted a hunched figure limping toward them. Mother Blackwell. Her skin hung from her bones like wet cloth. One of her eyes was missing now, replaced with a sewn patch of skin. She smiled. "Did you think killing his heart would end him?" Victor raised his fists. "I'll kill the rest of him." Mother Blackwell cackled. "You're in him. His body stretches under the city, under everything. He is everywhere." She turned her remaining eye to Evelyn. "And you, little witch, gave up too much of yourself. The Hollow King has you marked." Victor stepped forward. "Leave her alone." Mother Blackwell's grin faded. She lifted a sharp finger, pointing at Lila. "She is not free. She carries a piece of him now. She's his bride." Victor's stomach dropped. "What?" Lila whimpered. "What does that mean?" Blackwell laughed. "He marked her in the Hollow Realm. She's linked to him. She'll hear his whispers until she breaks, or joins him." Lila screamed, holding her head. She could already hear it, the whispering voice. Victor roared and lunged at Blackwell, but she vanished in a blink, her laughter echoing. Evelyn wrote, "We can't leave. She'll die." Victor grabbed her shoulders. "How do we save her?" Evelyn's eyes glistened. She wrote slowly. Sever the link. Go back. Face the king again. Victor stared at Lila, who sobbed in his arms. Then we go back, Victor said. Evelyn shook her head. I'm too weak. I can't guide you this time. Victor swallowed hard. Then I'll go alone. But Lila grabbed his sleeve. No. Don't leave me. Victor kissed her forehead. I promise to save you, Lila. I will. He stood up. How do I get back in? Evelyn pointed to a nearby door, marked with a crooked crown. That's the way. Victor approached the door. Before he opened it, he looked back. Lila stared with tearful eyes. Come back, Vic. He nodded, then stepped through. This time there was no pain, just darkness swallowing him. Victor opened his eyes in the hollow realm again, but it was worse. The sky was bleeding red. Towers of bone and shadow stretched high. The ground was cracked, rivers of black ichor flowing between. The Hollow King stood waiting, taller, darker, his body now half shadow, half bone. His voice echoed, You returned, brave, or foolish. Victor shouted, Let my sister go. The king laughed. She is mine. She carries my mark. She'll never be free. Victor stepped forward. Then take me. Leave her. The Hollow King tilted his head. You offer yourself, your soul. Victor nodded. If it saves her? The king smiled. Agreed. He raised a clawed hand, shadows swirling. Then Victor whispered, But I'll take you with me. And he lit the blue flame of the lantern he'd hidden in his jacket. The flame roared to life, brighter, hotter. The Hollow King screamed. The blue fire spread. The Hollow King lunged, but Victor dodged, swinging the flame, burning chunks of shadow away. The king howled, You'll burn with me! Victor didn't stop. He remembered everything. His mother, Lila's laugh, his old life. Every memory was fuel. He ran forward, driving the flame into the king's chest. The Hollow King shrieked, his body cracking, breaking. You cannot destroy nothingness, he roared. But Victor looked him in the hollow eyes. I just did. The eye. King exploded in a cloud of smoke, his scream echoing into silence. Victor collapsed. The hollow realm crumbled around him, but then light. He opened his eyes, back in the hotel. Lila knelt beside him, crying with joy. Evelyn smiled faintly, tears in her eyes. Is he gone? Lila asked. Victor nodded. He's gone. But Evelyn wrote with trembling hands, Gone. But price paid. Victor frowned. What price? She touched his chest, and he felt it. A mark burned beneath his skin. A piece of the Hollow King still lived in him now, but Lila was safe. Victor smiled, faintly. I'll carry it, as long as she's free. They stood together, but the hotel still whispered, and Victor knew. Some prices are forever. The Blackwell Hotel was shaking. The walls pulsed, the floors trembled, and the ceiling groaned like a beast in pain. Victor Kane stood in the middle of the dark hall, his hand over his chest where the Hollow King's mark burned under his skin. He could feel it throb like a second heartbeat. Lila clutched his arm, her eyes wide with fear. Vic, what's happening? She asked. Victor swallowed hard. The king is gone, but this place, it's still alive. Evelyn Crow, pale and weakened, touched the wall gently. It rippled under her fingers like skin. She wrote on the wall, We must leave, now. Victor nodded. Where's the way out? Evelyn pointed down the hall, the way they had come in. But the hall didn't look the same. The doors kept shifting. The walls bled black slime. The hotel was changing, trying to trap them. Victor grabbed Lila's hand. Stay close. They ran as they moved. The lights in the ceiling flickered, then burst. Glass rained down. The air grew colder. Victor could see his breath. Shadows crawled along the walls, whispering, "Don't go. Stay. Feed us." They reached the main lobby, but the entrance doors were gone, replaced by a solid wall of flesh and bone, pulsing like a living heart. Lila cried, "We're trapped!" Victor slammed his fists against the wall, but it didn't budge. Evelyn knelt, writing in the dirt, "Find the spiral room. The exit is beneath it." Victor remembered. The spiral room, a chamber they had passed when they first entered, with a spiraling floor mosaic. "Where is it?" Victor asked. Evelyn closed her eyes, concentrating. Then she pointed up. The hotel groaned louder. They climbed the grand staircase, every step shaking. Shadows darted just beyond the corners of their eyes, whispering louder, trying to drive them mad. Victor's chest burned. The king's mark was glowing faintly. He ignored it. At the top of the stairs, they found it. A circular room with a spiraling black and white floor like a hypnotic swirl. In the center stood Mother Blackwell, her body even more decayed, her face half missing, showing bone. She laughed, voice like breaking glass. "Going somewhere, little mice," she croaked. Victor stepped forward. "We're leaving. You're not stopping us." Blackwell smiled. "You think you killed the king? He was just a vessel. The Blackwell lives. Always." She raised her hands, and from the walls, shadows poured in. A storm of smoke with faces inside, screaming silently. Evelyn tried to stand but collapsed, too weak. Victor stood alone. The mark on his chest burned, hotter. His vision blurred, and for a moment he saw himself as a shadow, empty and hollow. But then Lila's voice broke through. "Vic, don't let them take you." He blinked and focused. He wasn't hollow, not yet. Victor charged at Blackwell, grabbing a metal rod from the ground. She hissed, but he struck her, her brittle bones cracking. The shadows swarmed him, clawing, biting, but Victor remembered every reason to live. Lila's face, his mother's lullabies, Evelyn's silent bravery. Memories burned the shadows. "Away!" Blackwell screamed, and crumbled to dust. The shadows shrieked, retreating into the walls. Then the floor beneath the spiral cracked open, revealing a deep, dark pit. Victor looked down. "Is this the way?" Evelyn wrote, "The only way." Victor helped Lila climb down first, then Evelyn, then himself. They descended into darkness, the walls slick and warm, like the inside of a throat. The deeper they went, the louder the heartbeat became, but not the Hollow King's. It was the Blackwell itself. At the bottom was a narrow stone hallway, leading to a door of rotting wood. Victor kicked it open. Cold, fresh air hit his face. Outside, a foggy street. The real world. "We made it," Victor whispered. But something was wrong. Victor stumbled. His vision darkened. The mark on his chest burned white-hot. He fell to his knees. Evelyn knelt by his side, her eyes full of sorrow. She wrote, "The mark, you carried part of the king. He is in you now." Victor gasped. "I can't!" "Stop it!" Lila grabbed his hand. "Fight it, Vic. You're stronger than him." Victor closed his eyes. In the blackness of his mind, he saw the Hollow King's form, towering, grinning. "You thought you won," the king whispered. "I'm in your bones now. You'll never leave me," Victor screamed. Then, silence. Victor opened his eyes. He was lying on the foggy street, Lila and Evelyn beside him. He sat up. The mark on his chest was still there, but faint, like a scar. "Is he gone?" Victor asked. Evelyn wrote, "Not gone. Sleeping. Waiting." Victor stood slowly. Lila hugged him tightly. "We made it," she whispered. They walked down the empty street together. Behind them, the Blackwell Hotel was gone. The lot where it stood was empty, covered in mist. But Victor paused, because in the fog, he thought he saw a crooked crown drawn in the dirt. He shook his head. A trick of his mind. Or was it? They walked on. That night, Victor lay in a small apartment, Lila asleep on the couch. He stared at the ceiling. Then he heard it. Tap, tap, tap. Faint. Inside the walls. A whisper. "I'm still here, Victor Kane." His eyes snapped open. The Hollow King was waiting. Inside him. Inside the dark. Victor whispered back, "I know."